Seated in the room, Chinya sat in a daze for a considerable time before finally springing up, opening the door, and calling for the waiter. "Ah, miss, what can I do for you?" 10 servings of scallion salad and 5 bowls of rice. Dingon carefully fed the last sip of water to Pan Dongdong. "Sis, let's go to town and find another doctor to take a look." Pan Dongdong forced a smile. "Don't waste your money. I know my own condition. Just being able to avoid dying in that place is a stroke of luck. Stop attracting unwanted attention." Dingon recalled how they had been chased out of the village. Even the 2 sisters, wanting to rest in a dilapidated temple, were shouted away by the beggars. "Sis, let's go to the monastery. No one will chase you away there." She bent down, attempting to lift the emaciated figure. Pan Dongdong raised her hand to stop her, shaking her head. "Babe, do you remember that reed marsh we used to visit when we were young?" Tears welled up in Dingon's eyes. Babe, she had never had a name since birth. The eldest sister said she was the 5th child, the youngest, so they called her little sister. The second sister insisted that since daughters were seen as burdens, akin to the grass on the ground, they should simply call her little sister, dear. "If others did not cherish you, we must cherish ourselves. Sis, you must take care of yourself. In the future, I will support you until your hair turns gray and your teeth fall out. Sis, it's no use, babe. If I die, just burn me to ashes and bury me beneath that reed marsh, understand?" She wore an ethereal smile, as if recalling sweet memories. "When we were little, we often went there to collect duck eggs. It was truly delightful. Sis, do you want to eat duck eggs? I'll go buy some right now." Dingon wiped her tears and scrambled to her feet. "No, I haven't wanted them for a long time," she murmured. "I often think that we are no different from those ducks. When we can no longer lay eggs, we are sold. When they find out we are sick, they throw us away. Our entire lives are beyond our control." Her voice grew somber as she gradually succumbed to drowsiness. Dingon touched her exposed skin, which felt burning hot. The blisters and sores on her face and body were severe, so numerous that they sent shivers down one's spine. She glanced at them, unable to look any longer, and hurriedly wrapped her up in her robe before carrying her and rushing towards town. She dashed into a clinic, breathless. "Doctor, please save her. Quickly, put her down." The apprentice hurriedly gestured for her to lay her down. The attending physician, upon hearing the commotion, lifted the curtain and stepped out. The apprentice unveiled the clothing covering Pan Dongdong, startled, exclaiming, "Master." Dingon pleaded, "Doctor, please save her." The attending physician approached, his expression shifting dramatically. With a flick of his sleeve, he disdainfully declared, "Get out of here. I want treat that illness. Doctor, please save her." Dingon implored. "Humph. I have a pristine reputation. I won't let you filthy people tarnish it." The doctor stepped back, glaring at them with contempt. "Hurry and take her away. Don't dirty my place. Filthy people, filthy illness, get out of here." He barked, his ferocious demeanor making Dingon feel as if they were the apparitions of evil spirits. Slowly lifting Pan Dongdong once more, her mind went blank as she took one step after another towards the exit. Behind her, the attending physician chastised the apprentice, berating him for allowing anyone in, even those with such filthy ailments, claiming it sullied his reputation and instructing the apprentice to clean the floor. Passers-by cast malicious glances, their faces twisted with disgust, their venomous words leaving her bewildered as to how to respond. She plunged forward, her eyes catching sight of another clinic, just as a bucket of dirty water was thrown her way. "Get away, get away. Don't dirty my ground. What kind of person is this, out and about with such a disease instead of waiting at home to die, not ashamed of their ill fortune? Doctor, please save her. She was forced into this. She is a good person. She has done nothing wrong." Dingon clung to the doctor's leg, pleading. The doctor kicked her away, and she and the ailing Pan Dong Dong tumbled helplessly to the ground. Filthy! Filthy! Such a dirty sister. The younger sister isn't any cleaner. Why is she wandering around in such a state? What a disgrace! What misfortune must her parents have encountered to have given birth to such a daughter? If it were me, I would drown her. Better to save the family from disgrace. Such misfortune for the family. Pointing fingers, malicious stares, and unkind words rained down upon them. Dingon looked up, wanting to see who was judging them, but as she scanned the crowd, it seemed that everyone wore the same face, the same expression, equally venomous and equally cruel. "Stop talking! Stop talking!" Dingon shouted, covering her ears. She was forced into this. She was forced into this. Who wouldn't want to be clean? It isn't her fault. It isn't her fault. Tears streamed down her face as she bent down to embrace her sister, only to find the person in her arms utterly still, leaving her frozen in shock, and then the floodgates of her tears burst open. "Please save her. Please save her." Who can save her? The sharp, heart-wrenching cries echoed through the streets. An elderly doctor, his hair white and movement slow, trembled his way through the crowd of onlookers. Old doctor, just ignore it, it's too filthy." Someone in the crowd called out to him. The old doctor turned, waving his hand dismissively. When it comes to treating illness and saving lives, how can we discriminate between diseases and people? "Child, don't cry, let me take a look." He struggled to squat down, reaching out to lift the cloth covering Pan Dong Dong's face. Seeing the festering sores and blisters, his gaze remained calm, his expression unchanged. After examining her closely, he sighed, covering her again and looking at Dingon with compassion. "Child, she has already left us." No, that can't be." Dingon shook her head frantically, tears cascading down. "How could she die?" she murmured, seemingly unable to accept the reality. "But why wouldn't she die?" With such an illness, one cannot linger for long, especially since it seems she has never been properly treated. Otherwise, how could her face have rotted away? Ha ha ha. As she cried, she suddenly laughed. "Because we have no money." Because they had no money. She was sold because they had no money. She fell ill because they had no money. No one was willing to save her. Better to be dead, better to be dead. If she dies, no one will chase her away anymore. If she dies, no one will find her filthy. Dingon murmured, rising with great difficulty, carrying her sister away from town. If she dies, they should no longer stop you. In the future, if you wish to return home, you may do so. The old doctor stood there with his hands behind his back, watching them walk far away. What a tragic fate! Living in this world has never been an easy affair, let alone living a life that is clean and dignified. Yian County, the One family. In the afternoon, past the midpoint of the hour. When Jiao Jiao entered the main room with a graceful sway, pouting in complaint to Wen Fu, who was whispering something to Madame Wen. "Father, what time is it? Why did you call for me now? I'm so sleepy." She pinched her handkerchief over her mouth and yawned. Upon seeing her, Madame Wen rose and approached, playfully poking her forehead. "How dare you speak to your father like that?" "Mother." When Jiao Jiao pouted, playfully twisting her arm, a hint of pride in her tone. "Look, Qi Jun sent me this hairpin. Isn't it beautiful? Very beautiful." Madame Wen nodded with a smile, then suddenly grew serious. "Do you remember what I told you?" When Jiao Jiao raised her chin proudly, smirking, "Of course, mother. I remember everything you say. I sent the white jade gift I showed your father earlier to him." Turning, she coquettishly addressed Wen Fu, who was sitting there, both annoyed and amused. "Father, let me choose another one for you." All right, just don't give me too many burdens." Wen Fu waved his hand, exchanging a knowing glance with Madame Wen. Madame Wen nodded, pulling Wen Jiao to sit down. Wen Jiao looked at them curiously. "Father, mother, what's going on?" You seem all secretive. Madam Wen waved her hand, instructing all the servants to leave, with her trusted maid standing guard at the door. Your fiancé has arrived. Wen Fu set down his teacup, leaving Wen Jiaojiao utterly stunned.
Chapter 47. Where did my fiancé come from? When did I ever have a fiancé? Wen Jiaojiao exclaimed, stamping her foot in indignation. She turned to Wen Lei, her father, and said angrily, Father, have you lost your mind? How could I possibly have a fiancé? Wen Lei glared at her and pounded the table in frustration. What of it? It is the command of parents and the arrangements of matchmakers. Am I wrong in this? I must have spoiled you too much. All right, the child is simply unaware and is just a bit anxious. Why should you take it so seriously? Wen Foren gently pushed Wen Jiaojiao, who turned away with a pout, refusing to budge. With an angry glare from Wen Foren, Wen Jiaojiao reluctantly approached, kneeling before Wen Lei, her voice trembling as she said, Father, I spoke in haste. Please do not be angry. It was unintentional. Seeing her pitiful demeanor, Wen Lei's anger dissipated. For this matter indeed stemmed from their lack of foresight. This was also due to my impatience back then. I only wished to find you a good family. And who could have known their fortunes would turn so ill? Wen Lei sighed. My dear, what do you propose we do? What do you mean what to do? Wen Foren interjected, her eyes narrowing and brows knitting together. Of course, there is no such thing. She beckoned to Wen Jiaojiao, who obediently rose to sit beside her. Our Jiaojiao has a good relationship with Qi Jun. That Qi Foren has hinted to me on numerous occasions. I have already loosened my stance, and now you want me to turn back at the final moment? Did I ask you to discuss this? Wen Lei shot her a look. They came to our door with a marriage certificate and tokens. What good is your argument? Upon hearing this, Wen Foren frowned in reproach. You were too hasty back then, and who was I hasty for? Wen Lei retorted, displeasure evident in his tone. Is it not for you too? I know you are doing this for Jiaojiao, for our family. Wen Foren softened her tone, holding his hand earnestly, it is simply that this family has no luck. They lost their official position and can only return home to farm. Her words brought comfort to Wen Lei, who smiled at her. Upon hearing this, Wen Jiaojiao exclaimed in dismay, Farming? Father, are you suggesting I go farm? She gazed at Wen Lei with imploring eyes. Am I raising you in luxury just for you to go farm? Wen Lei replied with irritation. Wen Jiaojiao's expression brightened, and with curiosity, she asked, Father, you still haven't explained what this marriage matter is about. Well, that was many years ago at that time. I had a good friend who held an official position in the capital. Though not a high-ranking official, he could be promoted in the future. The political arena is always about connections. You see, I happened to be in the capital selling a batch of silk when he invited me to his home. I found his only son to be intelligent, studious, and ambitious, so I thought, why not arrange a marriage while his position is still small? Your father even wrote to me about it. The boy is 3 years older than you. I thought it was a good match, albeit a bit of a stretch, but it is common for noble families to marry down and for common families to marry up, Wen Foren explained, wrapping her arm around Wen Jiaojiao's shoulder, who knew that shortly after this engagement was set, the family encountered some misfortune and was dismissed from their posts, returning home to farm in disgrace. When I heard this news, I was quite worried they would come to us under the pretense of marriage to seek favors. We did not hear from them again, and your father and I subconsciously forgot about it. Wen Foren said, lovingly caressing Wen Jiaojiao's face, Jiaojiao, I have only you and your brother as my precious children. How could I not plan for you? I have been delaying your engagement with Qi Jun, citing unfinished dowry preparations precisely because of this matter. Wen Lei nodded. His wife was always prudent in her actions. Had this matter been revealed before the engagement, it could have been dismissed as an old joke. But if it surfaced after the engagement or marriage, the implications would be quite different. Originally, your mother and I planned to wait until June, at which point I would personally visit that family to discuss matters. We must retrieve the marriage certificate and tokens. What now? She pouted, turning to Wen Foren with a playful demeanor. Wen Foren comforted her with a pat on the hand and turned to Wen Lei. I had the maid check. While they were dressed neatly enough, their undergarments were nearly worn out. One can only imagine the state of their other clothing. I hadn't noticed before, but he certainly appears to be a scholarly individual. Speaking with great propriety, Wen Lei hesitated, thinking, what if he possesses potential? What if he passes the imperial examination and becomes an official? My lord, is it so easy to become an official? Should we have our Jiao Jiao endure such hardships alongside him? Moreover, who knows how he lost his position? Perhaps those in power still harbor grudges. When Foreign voiced the very concerns that troubled Wen Leoi. After a moment of contemplation, he stroked his beard in silence. When Jiao Jiao grew anxious, "Mother, soon Qi-jun will come to propose. What shall I do if he finds out? Do not rush. Such matters cannot be hurried. The more haste, the more likely the chaos." When Foreign remained calm, her concern directed elsewhere. "You say Qi-jun is coming to propose?" "Yes," when Jiao Jiao shyly nodded. "You must not go out for the time being," with a shift in her gaze. When Foreign made a decisive choice. "Mother," when Jiao Jiao stamped her foot in protest, "how can I not go out? What if Qi-jun?" "Silly girl, why are you in such a panic?" When Foreign playfully tapped her forehead. "Men are always anxious before they win us over. Trust your mother. You cannot go wrong," when Foreign meticulously advised her. "Very well," in the end, when Jiao Jiao reluctantly agreed. "You may return now, but you are not to go out." When Foreign instructed her to leave. "But, mother," when Jiao Jiao glanced at the contemplative Wen Laoyi, "Do not worry. Your father has a plan." When Foreign gazed at her with a serious tone, "As for you, focus on practicing your needlework." Noting Wen Jiao Jiao's lack of enthusiasm, she added, "Are you hoping for another woman to make undergarments for Qi-jun?" The last few words were spoken softly, yet when Jiao Jiao's face flushed crimson as she hurriedly performed a bow to her parents and rushed off. Coming back to his senses, Wen Leoi observed her hasty retreat and inquired, "What is the matter with Jiao Jiao? She is growing up and is now shy." When Foreign deftly diverted the topic, "Rising to pour a cup of tea, my lord. Have you thought about what to do?" When Leoi accepted the teacup, "I will find an opportune moment to explain and retrieve the tokens and marriage certificate. But my lord, if this matter spreads, it could tarnish Jiao Jiao's reputation." When Foreign recalled another concern. "In a few days, it will be the academy's break. If Mao Heng returns and hears a rumor, and if he carelessly lets something slip, if our son returns and hears someone gossip—" "What do you mean, my lady?" When Leoi looked at her hesitantly. "The longer the night, the more dreams it brings." When Foreign smiled gently, despite showing signs of aging. She still exuded a graceful charm. When Leoi felt guilty and thought it best to offer some silver. "Let it be a way for your lord to support the family's younger generation in their studies." When Leoi nodded, his mind made up. As June approached, the night was somewhat restless, yet a cool breeze swept through. Xu Sheng was summoned to the study by the steward, who informed him that the master would arrive shortly. "Please, young master, make yourself comfortable." Xu Sheng nodded. "May I read a book?" "Feel free." The steward placed a cup of tea before him and quietly withdrew. An hour passed, and Xu Sheng remained alone in the study, unfazed as he stood before the bookcase, engrossed in a tome. After 2 hours, Xu Sheng had gathered a pile of books at his side, having chosen them from the shelves before pulling over a chair to sit beside the oil lamp. Utterly absorbed in his reading. Outside, when Leoi raised an eyebrow and signaled to the steward, who whispered, "My lord, it has been 2 hours, and there has been no movement inside." When Leoi raised an eyebrow, somewhat surprised. "Has he had dinner?" "No, according to your instructions, no one has been sent to serve him," the steward replied. When Leoi nodded, "Open the door and bring in some snacks." "Yes, haha, dear nephew, I apologize for keeping you waiting." When Leoi entered with a loud laugh, full of apologies, "It was truly my oversight. As your elder, it would not matter if I waited 2 hours or even 10 days. Xu Sheng's expression remained cool as he closed the book and casually placed it aside. "Hee hee." When Leoi felt somewhat awkward, "Dear nephew, how have you been lately?" "It was fine until today. I encountered 2 people earlier, and that changed everything." Xu Sheng raised his gaze, his eyes bright and clear. When Leoi's brow twitched, and before he could say anything, he heard, "I encountered your young lady with the county magistrate's son, and they seemed quite close." "Haha, that is merely... Our families are friends." When Leoi awkwardly dismissed it. "Friends? Is it not that they disdain my family's poverty? Wishing to climb the social ladder?" Xu Sheng looked at him, his eyes slightly narrowed, his words laced with sarcasm. "Nephew, that is too harsh." When Leoi's expression darkened, glaring at Xu Sheng. "Our families were merely jesting back then." Xu Sheng chuckled softly, and when Leoi found himself at a loss for words as he saw him pull out the marriage certificate from years past, his face turning beet red. I do not expect the literary figure to keep his promises with unwavering integrity. However, Maintaining one's dignity is paramount, as you surely understand, Uncle One. He retorted sarcastically, Uncle One, if you wish to seek a suitable match for your daughter, you must first resolve this marriage contract of mine. Yet, how can one expect you to comprehend the concept of wealth that does not lead to indulgence, or power that cannot bend the spirit, when you lack even the most basic etiquette in hosting guests? Master Wen's complexion shifted between shades of blue and purple, but recognizing his own fault, he had initially intended to let this young man stew a bit to facilitate further discussions. Oh, his dismay. This young man proved to be quite the simpleton. It seems, even the esteemed daughter of a wealthy family is beyond my reach. Xu Shang pressed his hand upon the marriage contract, casting a meaningful glance at Master One. Uncle One, the Xu and Wen families have had their connections. Should we not preserve some semblance of goodwill? He lowered his gaze, concealing his emotions, appearing innocent and harmless, yet the faint smile at the corner of his lips suggested a cunning mind at work. The old man understood. Master Wen narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing him, nodding slightly as he retrieved a stack of silver notes from his sleeve, placing them before him. This matter has never transpired, yet it is agreeable. Is it not? Xu Shang cast a casual glance at the notes, then gathered a stack of books nearby, silently observing him. Master Wen nodded. What is your intention, dear nephew? Naturally, I have merely come to pay a visit to my father's old acquaintance. And you have kindly procured some books for me. He pushed the marriage contract and a piece of jade towards him. Master Wen inspected them closely, a warm smile spreading across his face. I have truly neglected my esteemed nephew. Not at all. It is my own lack of possessions that is to blame, and I cannot hold others accountable. Xu Shang was unfazed by his own poverty. Rather, he accepted it with surprising equanimity. He picked up the books and stood to leave. I apologize for the intrusion, uncle. I shall take my leave, Master One exclaimed. It would not be too late to depart tomorrow morning. Xu Shang paused momentarily. Replying, I am too hungry to endure. Master One immediately felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. Chapter 48. In utter darkness, he cautiously made his way to the edge of the bed. Squatting at its foot, anxiously tugging at his sleeves, he pondered, should he climb into the bed or not? If he did, what if she decided to take drastic measures against him? Conversely, if he refrained, what if she ran off with someone else? The thought of someone previously criticizing him for his lack of physicality made him sigh. Qianyi turned over, unable to bear the sight of someone acting foolishly in the dead of night. You know, it's one thing to not return at such a late hour, but to crouch by her bed upon returning is rather unsettling. What on earth does he intend to do? Qianyi. Xu Shang whispered, leaning close to her ear. Qianyi remained still, her breathing steady. Heroine, heroine. Still, there was no response. Qianyi, heroine, someone is attempting to steal your silver. Qianyi scoffed, I see you as the real thief. Heroine, someone is after your kitchen knife. Xu Shang poked her. Hey, heroine, where have you placed your knife? Qianyi rolled her eyes. Are you suggesting we engage in some intimate activity with it? I'm trying to sleep. Xu Shang chuckled quietly, suddenly covering his mouth for fear of waking the person in bed. He removed his outer garment, yawned, and then lay down beside Qianyi, gradually falling asleep. The rhythm of her breathing slowed, and Qianyi sat up abruptly, her gaze complex as her hand brushed against the knife hidden beneath her pillow. She contemplated whether to simply end things with a swift slice for convenience's sake. Xu Shang stirred restlessly, sensing a chill encroaching upon him, and suddenly jolted awake. Upon opening his eyes, he was met with a gleam of cold light flashing in the darkness, brandishing back and forth in his direction. Awake, are we? Her voice was calm in the shadows, yet carried an undeniable threat. Now, provide a reasonable explanation. Is there a time limit? He trembled, cowering at the head of the bed. Heh. Qianyi chuckled lightly. That depends on my mood. How do you perceive my mood? She asked, cracking her knuckles ominously. It must be rather poor. His eyes darted around, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Suddenly, an idea struck him, and he closed his eyes, taking a leap of faith as he lunged forward. Qianyi, taken by surprise, quickly moved the knife aside, tilting her head just in time to feel a sharp pain on her lips. Silently, she moved the knife back into position. The person on top of her trembled, seemingly indifferent to the precariousness of life and death, resolutely kissing her. Qianyi thought to herself, if you're scared enough to tremble, then don't attempt to kiss. One swift strike would suffice. No, if he died, there would be a need for burial, and if he survived, it would bring further complications. Perhaps leaving him half-paralyzed would be simpler. With a forceful shove, she tossed him aside, the knife flying from her grasp and embedding itself in the wall, while she flung the covers over him. Qianyi sprang to her feet and began to strike. The punch aimed squarely at the softest part of his body was about to land when suddenly, the voice from beneath the covers cried out, "I have withdrawn my engagement." The fist halted at the covers, then came crashing down. "Humph! Your withdrawal has nothing to do with me." Qianyi stood atop the covers, unleashing a flurry of blows. "Wah? Heroine, spare me! Heroine, spare me!" The scholar beneath the covers gasped for breath. "Humph! How did you get in?" Qianyi sat cross-legged, exhaling a breath of frustration. "Your door was unlatched and I was uneasy. So I thought to lock it for you. But in locking it, I found myself unable to exit, and when I called for you, you ignored me." Xu Sheng felt utterly wronged. "So, I must thank you then." Lacking experience in inns, she had genuinely forgotten about the need to secure the door. Previously, in the monastery, what was the point of locking the door? What could possibly be stolen? There was a time a thief had indeed sneaked into Shuangyan Mountain, first robbing Shuyuan Temple, only to be warmly invited by Master Ku Rong to serve as an apprentice. Ultimately, he left in tears, pleading to be released. Unrepentant, he tried again at a nunnery, thinking it easier to steal from women, only to be knocked senseless by Qianyi, who was up early for breakfast, then tied to a tree for the night. He ended up plowing fields for a month against his will, crying as he fled. Since then, thieves have vanished from the vicinity of Shuangyan Mountain. Note, at that time, Qianyi had yet to master her strength, and later, Master Mingjing remarked that it was truly a stroke of luck he hadn't met a more dreadful fate. Do not be overly courteous. Xu Sheng lay beneath the covers, breathing heavily, feeling as though he had escaped death, grateful that he had not met the knife. "Humph!" Qianyi snorted, pulling the covers over herself properly and lying down. Exposed to the air, Xu Sheng sat up, leaning beside her. "I have withdrawn my engagement. Should I announce it with a fanfare for all to hear?" Qianyi kept her eyes closed, turning her back to him. "That would be unnecessary," Xu Sheng mumbled, feeling around until he grasped her hand. "From now on, you are not to look down upon me any longer. No more jests about my lack of physique. That is absolutely unacceptable. I eat plenty. Then I shall eat less," he said weakly. "At worst, I will copy a few more books." Seeing Qianyi remain silent, he grew anxious. "No, I will become a steward instead. Face and pride are trivial. Of course, my wife is of utmost importance. One cannot cuddle with pride at night. Silence is golden during meals and slumber. Do you not understand?" Qianyi found him bothersome. Disrupting her sleep? Oh! Xu Sheng lay down, wide-eyed, pondering what this heroine beside him truly desired. Had she given her consent? "What did you ask?" "I merely wanted to know if you consented." Qianyi closed her eyes, a faint smile curling at her lips as she drifted off to sleep. The bookish scholar's delayed return had led her to overthink. A good beating seemed justified. The following morning, Qianyi was roused by Xu Sheng's voice. Or rather, by the rumbling of his stomach, gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. It could almost sing a tune. She sat at the edge of the bed, casting a glance at the slumbering figure, her gaze slightly disdainful as she regarded the drool at the corner of his mouth. Rising, she dressed and made her way outside, pausing at the door before returning to his bedside. After a moment's hesitation, she leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Very well, I shall not hold it against you. Even if you lack the weight of two taels." Downstairs, the young attendant had an indelible impression of this lady, and, upon seeing her approach, seemed somewhat intimidated. "Miss, what would you like to eat? What do you have?" Qianyi inquired after a brief silence. "Buns, steamed bread, flour rolls, wontons, noodles, steamed cakes, fish cakes, flatbreads, tofu pudding, fried dough, and baked goods." The attendant rattled off a series of items, fearing that if he delayed even a second longer, he might be devoured by this voracious eater. She loved meat, but not the flesh of humans. "Thank you very much. 10 meat buns, 10 meat pastries, and 2 bowls of tofu pudding." "Very well." The attendant, glancing back at her stomach as he left, wondered if it was truly bottomless. Halfway through her meal, Xu Sheng descended, still clad in his tattered robe, sitting opposite Qianyi, sipping tofu pudding while nibbling on a pastry. Noticing her gaze, he beamed broadly. What beautiful weather today, with birds singing and flowers blooming. Qianyi rolled her eyes, resting one hand on her forehead and pushing the pastry towards him. Please be mindful of your image, scholar. Xu Sheng looked at her in disdain. You have no appreciation whatsoever. Qianyi fell silent. Forgive her, but she truly saw no sunlight amidst the overcast sky. At the money exchange, Xu Sheng hesitated in the shadows for a while until Qianyi, growing impatient, remarked, Are you planning to rob the place? Sorry, but that's too heavy for me. I have no desire to carry it. Xu Sheng sneered at her. Do you truly think so little of me? I was merely contemplating whether to return to Lu County for the silver or withdraw it here. Is there a difference? Qianyi countered, I do not know if this money exchange exists in Lu County. Thus, he wished to withdraw all his funds up front, lest he encounter robbers on the road. Xu Sheng's expression was one of deep concern. Qianyi perked up, her interest piqued. Let us retrieve everything. Xu Sheng looked at her in astonishment. Only to hear Qianyi cackle, the journey will be dull. Let us add some excitement and perhaps earn a little. Isn't that a bit too reckless? He weakly raised his hand in protest. Qianyi shot him a glance, then poked at the wall beside her, where she had even made a miniature version of a plum blossom stake. Xu Sheng stared, bewildered, reaching out to touch it and then poking it with his finger. Isn't this really tofu? Qianyi ripped the nearly adhered paper from the wall. Could you act a little less foolish? Xu Sheng held her finger up to the light for a while, then tilted her head and asked, Heroine, do you take apprentices? No, I only accept those who warm my bed. Qianyi replied succinctly. Oh. Upon hearing this, Xu Sheng immediately stood straight, their noses nearly touching, breaths mingling. With a puff of air, he took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and inadvertently bumped into Qianyi. He became flustered, his gaze darting, cheeks flushing, stammering. Not only can I warm the bed, but I can also fan you to shoo away mosquitoes. How about that? Do you have a partner? No, she replied. I'm just waiting to see if someone is interested. He nervously swallowed, his gaze evasive, barely daring to look at her. His face was crimson, a forced calmness betraying his heart, which raced uncontrollably, as if it might burst. Tilting her head slightly, Qianyi leaned in and kissed the corner of his tightly pressed lips, saying, There's a little meat to be had, and turned to leave. Xu Sheng grabbed her, his voice hoarse, just one more kiss. As he spoke, he embraced her, lowering his head to kiss her. Forget about the two tails, he thought, better to kiss first and ask questions later. He was bold now, unlike before when he feared being reprimanded, always hesitating. This time, he approached her soft lips with fervor, indulging in a fervent kiss. Is that enough? After a moment, Qianyi, slightly annoyed, asked, No, just one more. He mumbled against her lips. Qianyi, now incensed, wrapped her arms around his waist, spun him around, and pinned him against the wall, fiercely kissing him as he gasped in surprise. That is not meat, he protested, covering his mouth, gazing at her with a pitiful expression. Human flesh is still flesh, she shot back. Humph, if you're so capable, go ahead and bite. Xu Sheng provocatively rolled up his sleeve, daring her with his eyes. Qianyi glanced at him, then lowered her head. Although he appeared slender, he was surprisingly firm. Humph. Seeing her hesitation, Xu Sheng smirked, letting his sleeve drop, intending to retract his arm. Qianyi swiftly caught him, rolled his sleeve up, and bit down hard as he looked on in horror. The sensation made his mind go blank, sending shivers through his body. Grimacing, Qianyi spat, Ugh, so salty. Do you bathe to fool ghosts? No, Xu Sheng, still dazed, replied. It's just, I was so scared by you last night that I sweated profusely. I think you can skip buying salt and just rub some mud on yourself, right? From now on, we can just lick each other. Save on salt. How disgusting, she exclaimed, punching him. Xu Sheng covered his head, tears welling in his eyes. But you said it first. Chapter 49. At the money shop, the clerk stared at him for at least a quarter of an hour. Xu Sheng showed no reaction, but the clerk was losing his patience. You, he stammered, shaking the silver note, hesitating to look at him. What is the matter with you? Xu Sheng smiled, his words sharp. If you're constipated, you might as well let someone else take over. The clerk's face stiffened as he glanced at Xu Sheng's patched sleeves, saying coldly, Is this yours? With that pitiful appearance, I wouldn't be surprised if it was stolen. Xu Sheng beamed brightly. Of course it's mine. Even if you dress like a gentleman, that silver note isn't yours. Even in this shabby state, the silver note still belongs to me. You? The clerk, furious, slammed the table and glared. From the look of you, you could still have 200 taels. I say you must have stolen it. Xu Sheng remained calm. Your jealousy won't help. Someone supports me, this talented scholar, but no one is likely to support you. This money shop clerk. It's clearly you who stole it. The clerk suddenly shouted. Xu Sheng paused, then yelled, Help! Someone's robbing me. Help! There's a robbery. His piercing cries startled everyone in the money shop. What is going on? The shopkeeper and the accountant entered, the former scanning the scene with displeasure. The clerk, still clutching the silver note in shock, found Xu Sheng standing on a chair, pointing at him. He wants to embezzle my silver note. I didn't tea. The clerk stammered in panic. Oh, you didn't tea? If that's the case, why the hostility? If you have no ill intentions, why not exchange my silver for me? Is my note fake? You're just a money shop. This isn't a courtroom where you need to investigate my silver note's past and present. With this demeanor, I thought you were a magistrate. Or should I write a complaint for you to take to the court? Xu Sheng's string of questions was sharp and articulate. He felt like applauding himself. Standing on the chair, he looked down at them. A crowd of onlookers gathered, confused. The shopkeeper's face darkened, and he slapped the clerk, leaving him dazed, covering his face in shock. The shopkeeper took the silver note, glanced at it, nodded at the accountant, who then gestured for Xu Sheng to step into a private room. Xu Sheng, arms crossed and smirking, refused to budge. The shopkeeper glared back. Aren't you going to apologize to the young master? The clerk shuffled over, head bowed, eyes filled with malice. I'm sorry, sir. No need for that half-hearted apology. I can't accept it. Xu Sheng seated himself, suddenly recalling something, his face turning pale. Hey, you're not running a black shop here, are you? Instantly, several patrons in the money shop retreated in horror. Young master, be cautious with your words. The shopkeeper bowed slightly, his eyes glinting with a cunning light. This is my failure in management. I hope the young master can overlook it. That sounds somewhat like an apology. Xu Sheng rose, stepping toward the accountant, pausing to ask the shopkeeper, what's your loss here? Normally, it's 100 for one, but due to the disturbance caused to the young master today, we'll waive it as a gesture of goodwill. The shopkeeper was quite accommodating. Xu Sheng was very satisfied. After Xu Sheng left with a bag of silver, the shopkeeper approached the clerk and scrutinized him, saying sternly, I had no idea you had such audacity. But, shopkeeper, look at his shabby appearance. Who knows if he really stole it? The clerk retorted, unwilling to back down. Still defiant, the shopkeeper coldly regarded him. On your first day here, I told you to follow the rules. But you insisted on being different. If you lack the insight, don't try to be a fortune teller. The clerk, still feeling aggrieved, pouted and attempted to argue. The shopkeeper, now disgusted, said, My establishment is small. You, a great Buddha, should seek your fortune elsewhere. In shock and panic, the clerk pleaded, Shopkeeper, I know I was wrong. Don't chase me away. If I don't chase you away, will I wait for you to offend others again? But clearly, you have no idea where you went wrong. Get out now. You want to even get your salary? Qianyi. Xu Sheng, jubilantly clutching a bag of silver, rushed over. Look, he proudly thrust the package forward. So much? Qianyi raised an eyebrow, glancing around. What was all that noise earlier? Did you come out unscathed? He shook his head triumphantly, recounting his earlier brilliance, then eagerly looked at her. Aren't I impressive? How did you manage to avoid getting beaten? I just happened to encounter someone reasonable. If they weren't, they'd have knocked you out and dragged you away. Heh, I thought of you being around. Just in case I called out, you'd come to my rescue. Don't think flattery will save you. Do you know what it means to face 10 with one? Qianyi pulled him closer. While one intellect can counter one strength, what happens when one intellect faces 10 strengths? Am I that foolish? He raised his eyebrows at her. What should I do then? First, retreat, and then we fight back. She looked disdainfully ahead, as if observing a bunch of clowns. What if we can't win? Do you know what hidden weapons are? Do you know what poison is? Do you know what underhanded tactics are? Xu Sheng stared at her in shock, muttering, What if we still can't win? Fool, Can't you run? Oh, he nodded dumbly, feeling enlightened. By the way, should I ask the heroine to go easy on me? He took a few steps, then turned back, vigilantly watching passers-by until someone shot him a look of disbelief before hurrying away, finally relaxing. Can you walk properly? Qianyi felt exhausted. I've been walking just fine. Xu Sheng insisted, trying to keep his gaze forward, whispering to her, why does it feel like everyone seems untrustworthy? Most likely because you don't look trustworthy, Qianyi replied, quickening her pace. Xu Sheng had to jog to keep up, burdened with the heavy silver, and as he saw Qianyi pulling ahead, he called out, Qianyi, wait for me. Qianyi, Qianyi. His voice echoed like a ghost chasing her, and Qianyi, with a sigh, stopped to wait for him. Why are you walking so fast? Xu Sheng panted. Because I find you embarrassing, Qianyi replied bluntly. Xu Sheng felt a twinge of grievance. Didn't we agree that you wouldn't think less of me? I am not merely contemplating the accumulation of wealth. Rather, I intend to return home, renovate my dwelling, and subsequently engage a matchmaker to orchestrate a grand marriage for you. Ultimately, as he spoke, Qianyi did not blush. Yet he felt a profound sense of embarrassment, clearing his throat twice, striving to maintain a facade of decorum. Qianyi pressed his lips together, extending a hand towards him, his gaze imbued with mirth. Xu Sheng's eyes sparkled with delight as he tossed the silver to her. Then casually wrapped his arm around Qianyi's waist, striding back with an air of confidence. By the way, I haven't inquired yet. Where did you acquire such a substantial sum of silver? My so-called childhood sweetheart had an affair with another. And seizing upon this, I resolutely demanded an annulment in order to silence me and prevent any tarnishing of their esteemed daughter's reputation. They provided me with hush money under the guise of supporting my education and examinations. Oh, Qianyi's lips curled into a dangerous smirk. So, you only decided to withdraw from the engagement upon discovering that your childhood sweetheart had been unfaithful? No, Xu Sheng replied, wide-eyed. I originally intended to call off the engagement. However, her indiscretion afforded me a splendid excuse. I never intended to marry her. If I were truly invested in this union, why would I have waited until today to act? Humph, well answered. Suddenly, Xu Sheng fixated on a figure ahead, prompting Qianyi to nudge him. What's the matter? Are you fatigued? If so, we can take a moment to rest. No, I merely find that individual familiar. Xu Sheng pointed towards a striking couple ahead. That man is my childhood sweetheart's heartthrob. How familiar. Are they not the same two we encountered yesterday? Qianyi scrutinized them closely. The woman beside him cannot possibly be your former fiancée, can she? Why does she exude such a worldly air? Her excessive makeup and flirtatious glances are rather overdone, and her demeanor is far too frivolous. She resembles not a refined young lady but rather a courtesan. She does not resemble my childhood sweetheart at all. She is likely a woman from some brothel. Xu Sheng displayed no inclination to defend his former fiancée, for their marriage was merely one of convenience. As long as they found happiness, the opinions of others were of little concern. Lest they invite trouble upon themselves, following lunch, Qianyi declared that the sun was too intense and suggested a nap before continuing their journey. Xu Sheng deposited their belongings in her room before proceeding to check out. Before Qianyi could react, she had cast a multitude of items across the bed. Hey, are you being excessively presumptuous? Familiarize yourself. It is bound to happen sooner or later. Move aside, you shameless one. Lying on the bed. Sleep eluded him for a considerable time, as the soft breaths near him sent a ticklish sensation from his earlobes to his heart. Xu Sheng licked his lips, his parched throat inquired. Qianyi, may I? Qianyi sighed, turning over to plant a gentle kiss at the corner of his mouth. Is it possible to sleep now? We must awaken early, for we still have a journey ahead. Can we bring along some meat buns? Xu Sheng gazed at her eagerly. Qianyi regarded him, pondering. Had you not eaten earlier? Speaking of which, Xu Sheng felt even more aggrieved. I only had one. Was that insufficient? Qianyi queried, bewildered. Certainly insufficient. It was merely a taste. Nodding, Qianyi replied. If you do not quiet down, I shall let you experience the flavor of those buns firsthand. Xu Sheng blinked, curiosity piqued. Qianyi sat up, wrapping him in the quilt, rolling him and stuffing him beneath the bed. If one cannot sleep on the bed, then beneath it shall suffice. You are utterly heartless. Xu Sheng gazed forlornly at the bed slats, having warmed the bed, only to be kicked out. Qianyi, at a loss for words. felt her lips twitch. In the sweltering heat of summer, why would one need to warm a bed? Having consumed all, you deny responsibility. Do you wish for me to silence you? A voice hissed through clenched teeth. Xu Sheng fell silent, and after a moment, could not resist crawling out from beneath the bed, climbing onto the mattress, producing a silver bracelet shaped like a fish playfully swimming among lotus flowers, while murmuring, "Henceforth you shall be mine." Chapter 50. As the final city gate locked shut, a donkey cart wobbled its way out of Yian County. Xu Sheng steadied himself against the swaying cart, hanging lanterns, his brow creased with confusion. "Qianye? Why must we travel in the dark?" The surrounding shadows seemed to loom ominously. This is simply because I find the daytime sun too oppressive." Such a response was rather capricious. Xu Sheng sat beside her, gazing melancholically at the sky. "Is it not also because this is better for fishing?" "You're thinking too much. I do not enjoy fish. The spines are simply too bothersome," Qianye replied earnestly. Xu Sheng rolled his eyes at the night sky, feeling as though he were being bullied for his lack of strength. "I believe I shall return and raise a pig instead." After staring at the heavens for a while, he suddenly declared, "Are you implying that she is a pig?" Qianye turned to him, her gaze sharp. "Do you truly perceive it that way?" Xu Sheng sighed wistfully. "This way, should you ever find yourself starving and wish to eat me, I can simply bring out the pig to shield myself. Would you care for braised pork?" Qianye inquired. Xu Sheng nodded. "How about fried pork tenderloin?" Another nod. "Crystal pork knuckles, sweet and sour ribs, for happiness meatballs, braised pig trotters." Qianye recited an entire list of culinary delights from the pig, prompting Xu Sheng to swallow hard. "Do you desire these?" Xu Sheng's eyes brightened as he looked at her expectantly. "Will you treat me?" "No, I merely wish to witness your drooling." Thus, Xu Sheng's expression turned woeful. "The evidence suggests that you are the one more covetous." She observed the road ahead while cracking this conclusion. Xu Sheng stared at her blankly. "Qing, how did you arrive at such a conclusion?" "You see, as long as it is meat and delicious, I am satisfied. Unlike you, who is so particular about the variety. Therefore, in comparison, it is undoubtedly you who is more gluttonous." "I truly wish to take a bite out of you." Xu Sheng glared at her indignantly. "Oh, then dwell on that thought." Qianye, ever understanding, replied, "However, I must remind you, scholar, that cannibalism is a crime." Xu Sheng stared at her in shock, his lips quivering slightly. Such cruelty! With a cry, he lunged towards her. Qianye was startled, exclaiming, "Hey, do you think this is your own home, where you may leap about freely? Watch out for the cart." "Ha ha ha." Qianye laughed heartily, dodging Xu Sheng's hands. She is ticklish, ha ha ha." Xu Sheng pinned Qianye down, relentlessly tickling her, watching her laugh until tears streamed down her face, feeling a sense of triumph as he declared, "This is what you get for teasing me." Stop, ha ha ha." Qianye laughed uncontrollably, her body quaking, evading while being careful not to hurt him, while Xu Sheng, oblivious to her caution, reveled in her laughter. Ha 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 ha. Through the silent, eerie, pitch-black path, a chorus of laughter echoed, a harbinger of mischief indeed. Let us return home." The timid old seven shrank back into the bushes. The leader swatted him aside. "Get lost, you useless thing. That is 200 taels of silver. When have we ever come across such a sum?" Old Three smirked lewdly. "I've never even seen that amount, but I have touched Chui's backside. Is it akin to that feeling?" Old Two spat at him. "Pathetic fool, that flirtatious Chui has ensnared you." Under the cover of night, he was indeed the attendant who had troubled Xu Sheng at the bank, his face twisted with malice. Little Six mentioned that there was a woman accompanying them. "When the time comes, the man will be dealt with and the woman sold off. What sort of virtuous maiden would not be available for marriage once we have the money? Brother Two, let me have the woman. I happen to be without a wife." Old Four rubbed his hands together, chuckling. "Not so fast." The attendant waved his hand impatiently. "Brother, with so many incidents transpiring on this road, we ought to cease after this one." Old Five expressed concern. "I heard the authorities issued a notice to apprehend us last time. Let us not attract the attention of the officials." Old Five makes a valid point. After this successful venture, we shall retire, take the silver, and seek a legitimate livelihood. The leader stroked the large knife in his hand, his gaze fixed intently on the path ahead. The attendant grew anxious, calling out, "Brother!" The leader silenced him with a glance. Turning back to shake his head, the attendant felt reassured. The leader merely sought to comfort them, and if absolutely necessary, they could dispose of anyone unwilling to cooperate. After all, they had already taken many lives. A few more would not matter. Brother. A figure resembling a monkey stealthily emerged from the bushes. Point 6. Why have you returned? The leader glared at him coldly. This rascal. Surely he harbors some ill intentions, brother. The scholar is playing around with that girl behind. Little Six's sharp features shone with excitement. Let us take action now, brother. Let us move. Just the thought of losing his livelihood due to the scholar's meddling made the attendant seethe with rage. In the past, while working at the bank, he had secretly observed those exchanging silver, contemplating how to strike. Who would have thought that this time, after merely asking a few questions, the scholar would ruin his prospects? Just wait, scholar. If I do not carve you up and feed you to the wolves, I swear I shall take your surname. The attendant silently vowed viciously. Old 5 and Old 6 prepared the lime. Ready for a fierce confrontation, Old 3 and Old 4 readied their weapons, while Old 7 kept a watchful eye. Old 2, be swift with the blade. The leader rose, wielding his knife with an air of menace. In the distance, a donkey cart approached at a leisurely pace, and upon closer listening, one could discern the sounds of laughter. Laughing even as death loomed, the fellow spat vehemently. Old 7, go. A frail, timid man emerged, banging a gong and shouting, robbery! Leave behind your money and women. Old 5 and Old 6 crouched on the ground, waiting for the cart to come closer so they could throw a handful of lime. The fellow sneered, baring his teeth. With such a pathetic scholar, is it even necessary to waste lime? With a flash of my knife, he'll surely wet himself in fear. The donkey cart hesitated as it drew near. And then, by the lantern beside the cart, two shadowy figures tentatively leaned out to peer in this direction. Suddenly, Old 5 and Old 6 sprang up, flinging their respective bags of lime. The fellow smirked. Anticipating the scholar's cries of anguish, what a delight that would be. Just then, a fierce gust of wind swept toward him, accompanied by a flurry of lime. The first to scream and roll on the ground. Covering their eyes were Old 5 and Old 6. Old 7, standing off to the side, was spared from the chaos but was so frightened that he wet his pants. Olds 4 and 3 fared no better, blindly slashing with their knives while covering their eyes. Who's there? Boss? Old 3, is that you? My eyes, brother. I'm blind. I can't see, brother. Save us. Old 5 and Old 6 wailed in a chaotic uproar. Gritting his teeth, the fellow charged forward, determined to strike down that scholar first. Yet, before he could reach the cart, a kitchen knife flew out of the darkness, its spinning blade landing squarely on his forehead with a clatter. The long knife fell from his hand, and he stood there in a daze for a moment before collapsing with a thud. Meanwhile, Chiba, who had casually thrown the kitchen knife, was now chasing after the fleeing leader. Seeing her relentless pursuit, the leader pulled a pouch of lime from his waist and threw it behind him. Chiba, shielding her eyes, hurriedly dodged, only to hear a thud followed by a cacophony of clattering sounds. Approaching cautiously, Chiba discovered Shushin crouched on the ground. Grinning at her, it turned out he had hastily dug a hole in the dark, hoping a hapless soul would stumble in, and now he saw the leader tumble headfirst into it. He quickly seized Old 7's gong and gave his head a good whack. What luck! Shushin triumphantly adjusted his clothing, striving to strike a pose of elegance. Chiba smirked. Just lucky, I suppose. The corners of her mouth involuntarily lifted. If you're jealous, just say so. Shushin shot her a flirtatious glance. Chiba burst into laughter. The two of them, like a string of gourds, bound the unfortunate bandits together. After some contemplation, Shushin decided that placing them on the cart would be a form of cruelty to the donkey. So he resolved to tie them to the back of the cart, forcing them to follow along. What is the matter? Shushin asked, noticing Chiba leaning silently against the cart. She looked up at him, and as her gaze fell upon the cart, she lowered her eyes. Understanding dawned upon him. He cupped her face and said earnestly, Chiba, no one can keep those whom the king of hell desires. But he died by my hand. Though it was not intentional, she pouted, her cheeks round like buns. Who told him to be so unfortunate? Besides, Chiba, if it weren't us being robbed today, or if you hadn't anticipated the ambush, or if you were unable to fight, surely our fate would not differ much from theirs. I just asked the most cowardly one, that old Seven, who was so scared he wet his pants. Stood frozen in place. He said he would slice me open and take you back as his wife, only to sell you later. Which scoundrel said that? Chiba, previously downcast, suddenly perked up, her fury ablaze as she stormed to the back of the cart. Yanking the ropes and delivering a round of blows to each of them, Shusheng listened to their cries, taking a satisfying sip of water. What a thrill! Next time, I must bring some wine. That would truly enhance the feeling of vengeance. To which magistrate shall we deliver them? Back to Yian County, or shall we continue to Tongxiang County? To Tongxiang County, Shusheng said, taking a sip of water. Exuding an air of calm confidence. Consider this. These rascals are robbing around Yian County. With their familiarity, it must not be their first time. What does this indicate? Shusheng was self-assured. It indicates they have connections in Yian County. He concluded decisively. Standing before the cart with his hand raised, he looked as though he had calculated every possible outcome, but alas, he waited in vain for any agreement. Puzzled by Chiba's silence, he turned to find her gnawing on a chicken. Her lips gleaming with grease, he exclaimed, "Chiba, you ungrateful wretch! What is wrong? Didn't you want to eat roasted meat?" She pointed behind her. "Look, 20 of them are all yours. Take your time. I won't snatch any." "How treacherous and cunning of you," Shusheng fumed, feeling dizzy with indignation. "Here, a chicken leg for you. Satisfied now? This is much better." He mumbled around the chicken leg. If, in the dead of night, you find yourself in a desolate area and see a cart with lanterns swaying at both ends, accompanied by various curses carried by the wind, do not be alarmed. It is merely the driver being too reckless. Chapter 51. The sun had risen high. A donkey cart came to a slow stop at the gates of Tongxiang County, where the soldiers on guard stared blankly at the disheveled figures sprawled in disarray behind the cart. What on earth was happening? The soldiers trembled inwardly, fearing they might have encountered a notorious killer known for his gruesome methods. "This esteemed brother, here is the magistrate's invitation. Please inform the magistrate that I have urgent business to discuss." "Oh." The guard, still shaken, stole several glances at him before hesitantly making his way to the magistrate's office. Shusheng leaned toward Chiba and whispered, "He must think I'm some kind of highwayman." Chiba slapped his chest lightly. "You're overthinking it. He probably just thinks you look like a human trafficker." Shusheng nearly spat blood, gesturing dramatically toward the unfortunate wretches tangled in a heap behind him. "With them like this, why would anyone want them? Even for farming, I disdain to feed them." After a moment's contemplation, Chiba replied, "To perform a juggling act. To tell others how they robbed us." Shusheng squinted at her. "Are you hoping to throw me into prison?" "Not at all." Chiba shook her head vehemently. "How could someone like me, who lives a pious life, be so malicious?" Hearing this, Shusheng gaped at her, his expression resembling a ghost's as he finally stammered, "Does your conscience not ache?" "Many years ago," Chiba said wistfully, gazing into the distance. "I had a dog." Blinking, Shusheng asked, "And then? Then my conscience was taken by the dog, and in turn, that dog was eaten by someone." Thus, she had lost her conscience. Stepping back warily, Shusheng licked his lips. "Can't you let go of grudges like that?" "As for me," Chiba sighed, revealing her shortcomings, "I eat more than a pig, possess strength greater than an ox, have a heart smaller than a needle, and my temper is as unpredictable as the winds of Shuangyan Mountain, arriving swiftly and departing just as fast." She looked at him, slowly extending her left hand, revealing a silver bracelet an inch wide, engraved with a design of fish frolicking among lotus flowers. "What do you mean?" Shusheng gazed at her, then at the bracelet. "I have a small heart. I dislike allowing sand to enter my eyes and naturally resist constraints. Free to grow, one and all, I have a small heart." She reiterated earnestly, her gaze fixed on the bracelet, feeling an overwhelming urge to weep. "Rather than wait for the day when you attract bees and butterflies, only for me to wield a kitchen knife against you, it would be better to go back and find your childhood sweetheart. Having a small heart is good. A small heart ensures one won't run off with others," Shusheng said with a grin. Noticing her still serious countenance, he cleared his throat, glanced around, and then pulled her into an embrace. "No worries, I'm the same. I want no childhood sweetheart. I only want a heroine with a kitchen knife. Leaning against him, Chiba gradually smiled and I in the magistrate's back office. The county magistrate circled around Shushing a couple of times, lifting his chin. Speak. What is the matter with that group who seem more affectionate toward me than their own fathers? Nothing much, just that Chiba was tired from the journey and decided to beat them a bit to stretch her limbs, and I, feeling cooped up in the cart, went to enlighten them about the karmic retribution of Buddhism. Shushing said with a formal bow. Your Excellency, it is evident that they attempted to rob us. He pointed to himself and Chiba. I have seen them. The magistrate's expression turned nuanced. Seeing their appearance, I find you two more akin to bandits, recalling the earlier visit to the jail, where the bruised bandits had cried and begged him for justice. The magistrate felt a pang of sympathy. He had never seen bandits who looked more wretched than those who had been robbed, crying and pleading for the county lordess' intervention. Your Excellency, I am merely a bystander, Shushing insisted earnestly. The magistrate nodded. I currently need a constable. Why don't you ask that one who is not just a bystander if she would be willing to come? Before he could finish, Shushing interrupted. Rather not? Your Excellency, the heroine has a bad temper, and if one day she were to smash your cord and injure you, that would be unfortunate. Hey, did I ask you? The magistrate glared. Shushing shrugged. No need to ask her. I already know. If it were the head constable, she might show some interest, but just a constable? What is the point? You have quite the attitude. The magistrate waved his hand in exasperation. Enough, get out of here. The young gentleman took his leave. Shusheng pretended to perform a bow before striding away. The steward approached and whispered, My lord, what about the evidence from those bandits? The so-called evidence is merely the stolen goods from the past. Wasn't it sent along with the corpse? My lord, the most critical part is missing. We have not seen any real gold or silver. Instead, we are left with a heap of gaudy, worthless items. One must not be overly greedy. The county magistrate cast a meaningful glance at his steward. Though not expect to achieve results and still desire silver. The steward's face flushed as he lowered his head in acknowledgement. Is he the county office's back gate? Shusheng peered into the yard while leading a donkey cart. Though the gate was closed, obscuring his view, he insisted on stretching his neck to look inside. What are you doing? Chinny asked. Standing on tiptoe to see, there's nothing to see. I merely wish to know when you'll emerge. I fear I might miss you. Shusheng sheepishly diverted his gaze, feigning seriousness. Oh, let us go. Chinny sighed and tossed a large bundle into the cart. Shusheng casually inquired. What is that? Did the county magistrate's wife send it? Yes, Chinny frowned, somewhat distressed. ITS said that both the station master and Madame Jan sent gifts. I didn't want Mrs. Xue to think I had ulterior motives. So I accepted them. If I refuse, she would surely be restless. Shusheng's eyes brightened with anticipation. Is there anything for me? Indeed, 2 sets of clothing, 2 sets of ink, paper and brushes, and 2 silver taels. I have 2 sets of clothing, a set of silver jewelry, and 2 silver taels. Why aren't you pleased with such good fortune? It feels somewhat like coercion. Hee. She merely wishes to avoid being indebted. Afraid she cannot repay. Chinny raised an eyebrow, questioning why it was necessary for others to accept gifts, as if rejecting them implied contempt. Officials are truly peculiar. All right, let us depart. Chinny, I am quite famished. Shusheng patted his belly, noting that it was already afternoon. Isn't there a sesame cake? Just nibble on a couple of bites. Too dry. Shusheng replied expressionlessly. Could you not allow me to return and savor it slowly? Not a chance. I worry it might spoil in this weather. Could it still be edible by tomorrow? Chinny wiped her brow. It was nearly June, the hottest time of the year. There are still 10 left. I shall have 3 tonight, and 2 each for breakfast, lunch, and dinner tomorrow, and 1 for a snack. In any case, Shusheng was resolute in his decision to dine out. Do not forget, you promised to treat me to 3 meals. He had an excellent memory. Qianyi cast him a helpless glance and nodded. Let us go. What shall we eat? Shusheng pondered, gazing at the surrounding eateries. How about roast suckling pig? His eyes sparkled with excitement. Qianyi studied him intently. You certainly know how to eat, hee. After their meal, Qianyi purchased a pound of orange candy, 2 pounds of cloud cakes, and a pound of rice noodles. The 2 of them then sat on the cart's yoke, leisurely strolling down the street. This is delicious, Shusheng exclaimed, holding up a piece of cloud cake. Weren't you just saying you couldn't eat any more? Qianyu was taken aback. I believe I can squeeze in a bit more. Xu Shang quickly snatched the last 2 pieces. Qianyu shot him a sidelong glance, and he reluctantly shared 1 piece with her. Can we buy a bit more? Xu Shang licked his fingers. Still wanting more? Absolutely not. Qianyu firmly rejected him, shoving a piece of rice noodle into his mouth instead. The glutinous rice noodles, coated in thick brown sugar, were sweet yet not cloying, utterly irresistible. Indeed, Qianyu nodded. You have a penchant for sweet treats, with one in his left hand, one in his right, and one still in his mouth. Xu Shang stared at her in shock. What are you planning, from now on? Someone will enjoy the leftover snacks. Qianyu felt a sense of fulfillment. She adored sweet foods, but often found them too rich after just a few bites. However, after days without them, she craved them fiercely. No worries, my brave heroine, the more the merrier, he declared, crunching with delight. You enjoy sweet, crispy snacks. Qianyu noted to herself, in Panja village. Dingan stood before the dilapidated wooden door, staring at it for a long while before finally pushing it open. A few villagers passing by pointed at her back. Unable to fill their bellies, yet they relish meddling in others' affairs, she scoffed, stepping inside and forcefully closing the door behind her, shutting out the curious gazes from outside. In the back courtyard in the east wing, the starving Pan Tai struggled to crawl down from his bed toward the door. On the other side, Pan Dague lay snoring contentedly, his belly protruding. Dingan pushed the door open, and the musty, decayed air rushed towards her. She remained unfazed, merely casting a fleeting glance at the person on the floor. What? Has my sister not given you anything? Are you reduced to crawling on the ground like a dog? In their childhood, the sisters had begged him for scraps, and now he was reduced to begging. Give me 2 bowls of porridge, Pan Tai croaked, having not had a drop to drink for 3 or 4 days. Dingan glanced around. 2 empty bowls sat beside Pan Dague, and seeing Pan Tai's emaciated form, it was clear that Pan Dague had not spared him a single grain of rice. Though not his biological child, he had at least pampered him for so many years. Tio treat him so cruelly. Was he intending to starve him? Truly, not an ounce of affection left. Dingan looked at him with malice. Her right hand hidden behind her back. 5th sister, please give father something to eat, Pan Tai pleaded, his sunken cheeks resembling the gnarled branches of a withered tree. Very well, Dingan replied readily, approaching Pan Dague's bed, where she could smell the stench of decay and incontinence. What is the meaning of living like this? She coldly scrutinized him, noting he had lost some weight and appeared somewhat fairer, like a delicate white radish. Eat! She tossed a bun behind her, and Pan Tai, not pausing to wonder why she was being so accommodating today, snatched it up and devoured it greedily. Pulling a thin blanket from Pan Tai's bed, she let some items spill onto it before forcefully pressing it onto Pan Dague's face. Whoa, Pan Dague struggled, nearly toppling Dingan before long. He lay still, and she calmly lifted the blanket to take a look before turning around. Clutching one corner of the blanket and addressing Pan Tai, 2nd sister is dead, father. You wronged her most during your life. Since you are of no use alive, you might as well go below and atone. She expressionlessly raised the kitchen knife in her hand. Pan Tai was stunned, glancing between her and the motionless Pan Dague, recalling how she had coldly executed their 2nd brother, causing him to tremble. Scrambling to escape while shouting, "Help! Help! A murder has occurred." Chapter 52 today marked a momentous occasion at the village chief's home in Panja village, as his daughter was to be betrothed. The village chief, beaming with joy, appeared particularly spruced up for the day, engaging in lively conversation with others, in the kitchen. The village chief's wife scrutinized her daughter from head to toe, adjusting her hairpin and skirt before finally satisfied. She urged her, "Go on, mother." In her pink dress, Pan Shower shyly called out, her hair styled simply in a bun secured with a silver pin, adorned with a camellia flower, with a few strands cascading down to frame her face. Her delicate features accentuated by the rosy hue on her cheeks, evoking a sense of pity in those who beheld her. "Mother, Qiao looks truly beautiful today." The 2nd daughter-in-law flattered that, of course, our Qiao is not one to boast. "She is among the finest in the village," the village chief's wife said with pride. The eldest daughter-in-law silently handed a plate of stir-fried vegetables to Pan Qiao, then stated in a neutral tone, "Mother, it's time for Qiao to make her appearance. Indeed, today she must make her appearance. When the matchmaker presents your hairpin later, Just lower your head and smile. Do you understand? The village chief's wife instructed. Concerned as she had raised her daughter to be delicate and now was apprehensive about her marrying off in the main hall, the village chief was drinking with the clan elders and his cousin, who spanned a generation apart, along with the matchmaker, Elder Tion. Nearby, a group of young men with fair complexions and handsome features sat, one of them frequently glancing outside. Noticing this, Mrs. Tion discreetly nudged him. What's the rush? Mother, how can I not be anxious when I don't even know what my bride looks like? Tianjin frowned, clearly displeased. What if you find me an ugly one? How will I live my life? Mrs. Tian, irritated, pinched him. I am your own mother, not a stranger. Do you think I am unaware of your thoughts? Rest assured, she is quite a fair maiden. Though she is a bit slender. I suppose that's typical for a young woman. We can always fatten her up later. I just can't shake my worries, he grumbled. The village chief's wife entered with a smile, greeting everyone. I truly apologize for the delay in the dishes. Please do not hold it against us. She waved behind her. Xiao, place the dishes there. Tianjin's eyes brightened, sitting up straight as he beheld a girl in a pink dress approaching gracefully. The camellia in her hair made her cheeks glow like the setting sun, her slender waist swaying as she walked, resembling the willows by the riverside, enchanting. Pan Xiao stepped lightly, placing the dishes before Mrs. Tian, and as Tianjin inhaled, the fragrant aroma enveloped him as she drew near. Madame Tian noticed her son staring at her with wide eyes, which made her somewhat displeased. However, upon reflection, she realized that her son's infatuation had alleviated one of her worries. And thus she smiled warmly, taking Pan Xiao's hand and showering her with compliments. The village chief's wife, standing nearby, repeatedly expressed her modesty. Madame Tian then produced a gold hairpin and delicately placed it atop Pan Xiao's head. Thinking to herself how she would love to take such a splendid girl home immediately, the village chief's wife, with a smile, humbly replied, You flatter me too much. It is you who must offer her proper guidance in the future. As the two women exchanged pleasantries, a commotion erupted outside, as if someone was shouting for help. Help! Help! Village chief! Clan elder! A young man from the village rushed in, exclaiming, Clan elder, you must come and see. Something has happened. What is going on? Why are you all in such a frenzy? The clan elder slammed his cup down in anger. It was embarrassing for him to raise his voice in front of guests. The village chief's expression darkened as he glanced apologetically at his in-laws, rising to inquire irritably, Ada, what is the matter? Why are you shouting? It's not me. It's that Pantai who is shouting something about a dead person. The young man protested, feeling wronged. Nonsense. Who's dead? What are you talking about? The village chief exclaimed, startled, as he instinctively scolded, while simultaneously glancing at his in-laws across the table. Clan elder, village chief. Pantai burst in, half running, half crawling, clearly exhausted, mumbling, Someone's dead. Someone's dead. Madame Tian's expression shifted, and she quickly pulled her husband and son aside, saying, In-laws, we must take our leave now. But we haven't finished eating, the village chief's wife said anxiously. Signaling to Pan Xiao, Xiao, take your aunt to your room for a moment. Village chief. Pantai suddenly screamed, startling everyone. His face was pale with terror as he grasped the village chief's hand. Trembling, old five, my old five, she has killed someone. Who has killed someone? The clan elder interrogated him intently. Pantai swallowed hard and collapsed onto the ground. My old five, she killed Pandague. She wants to kill me now. He cried, pounding his thigh in despair. Old five has killed someone? The village chief was taken aback, and before he could ask further, Dingen walked in. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair half tied back with strands of delicate white flowers cascading down. Her brows arched like slender willows, her eyes as gentle as spring water. She entered gracefully, her demeanor poised and dignified. I apologize for interrupting, she said lightly, her gaze flickering from Pan Xiao to Tianjin. The corners of her mouth lifting ever so slightly, her eyes carrying a hint of sarcasm as they passed over the trembling Pantai hiding behind the village chief. Father, it's time to go home. No, you're going to kill me. Pantai shook his head frantically, retreating in fear. Tianjin stood there, transfixed by Dingen's beauty, rendered speechless. She was stunning, effortlessly captivating without excessive adornment, drawing the eye immediately. Pan Xiao lowered her head, catching a glimpse of Tianjin's expression out of the corner of her eye, her fingers digging into her sleeve in frustration, her face contorted with anger. If Ding An's beauty was bold and direct, needing no embellishment, then Pan Xiao's was delicate and refined, exuding a fragile allure. In terms of appearance, one was akin to a fiery spirit, igniting a blaze, while the other was as subtle as a gentle stream, revealing its essence only to those who took the time to savor it. "Father, are you confused?" Ding An asked softly, her calm demeanor suggesting she was merely inquiring about his preferences rather than confronting an individual accusing her of murder. The village chief, uncertain, exchanged glances with the clan elder, who nodded. The village chief turned apologetically to his in-laws, saying, "Brother Tian, please continue your meal. I must go and see what is happening. Uncle, please keep her company for a moment." He instructed his cousin, who nodded in a simple-minded manner, rising to take his cup and repeatedly apologizing to the Tian family. Old Master Tian remained unfazed. To him, this was merely a village matter, unrelated to his future daughter-in-law's family, thus bearing no connection to her. However, Madame Tian felt somewhat displeased, though she had no valid reason to be angry, merely irritated at the disruption of what was meant to be a joyous occasion. Meanwhile, Tianjin sat there, lost in thought, frequently glancing outside in the room. Pan Xiao lay on the bed, furious. The village chief's wife anxiously grabbed her. "Little aunt, do you still want to get married?" At this moment, "Who are you throwing a tantrum for? Is this face for your future mother-in-law to see?" she chided, exasperated. "How can you be so foolish as you grow older? Mother, that vile woman, she did it on purpose." Didn't you see how Tianjin looked at her? Pan Xiao's ire boiled over. What if she did it intentionally? With her background, who would dare to take her? The village chief's wife softened her tone. "Xiao, remember that men are inherently drawn to beauty. You must never forget that you are the legitimate wife." "Mother, am I truly to allow her to enter the door?" Pan Xiao looked at her mother incredulously. "Why are you so naive?" Her mother sighed. "I want you to hold your ground. If Pan Xiaowu truly has no shame, your mother-in-law will handle her when the time comes. What good is her beauty? With her background, few would dare to marry her. Just focus on your embroidery for your dowry." The village chief's wife reassured her daughter, though her disdain for Pan Xiaowu grew, pondering how to deal with that hussy. Meanwhile, the village chief stepped inside first. The clan elder sighed. "I wonder why Pantai's family is always in such turmoil." Pantai cowered behind him. "I want to know why I'm so unlucky. What have I summoned upon myself?" He looked fearfully at Ding, clearly regarding her as some sort of demon. The clan elder, exasperated, smacked him. "Why don't you consider your own faults? What a waste of a son's life. Causing such a ruckus." Ding leaned against the wall, listening, and suddenly laughed. Not at him for wanting a son, but at his futile struggles. There was a hint of superiority in her disdain. Ding suddenly recalled that the clan elder had 3 sons. What a ridiculous man! "Pan Xiaowu, why are you laughing?" The clan elder glared at her, scrutinizing her with distaste. "Pantai, your daughter is of age. Hurry up and find her a match. If you let her linger, it'll become a joke. Find her a match? I'm afraid she'll stab me with a knife." Pantai muttered, then suddenly shouted. "I want her gone." "It's fine, village chief." The village chief emerged, irritated. "There's nothing going on inside. Pandagawe is sleeping soundly. There's no dead person." He scolded disdainfully. "Can't you stop being so dramatic? Your family's troubles are endless." "Clan elder, let us go. The Tian family is still waiting," he said, suppressing his anger toward the clan elder. The clan elder, suspicious, glanced back, nodded, and stood at the door, peering outside before turning to leave. Ding smirked at Pantai, thinking, "How could I let you off so easily?" Pantai shivered, urgently grabbing her. Clan elder, you can't ignore me. You are my uncle. Indeed, I am your uncle." The clan elder scoffed, turning to leave. How could he truly be bothered with such a mess? Weakened from days of hunger, Pantai collapsed onto the ground, lacking the strength even to shout. Chapter 53. Ding approached, assisting him to his feet. "Stop overthinking. I plan to wait until second sister a 7th day before sending you all away. She truly wants my life." You so venomous." Pantai trembled, staring at her. his energy dissipating like a boneless fish, turning into a puddle of mud. I know. Dingen smiled sweetly. Father, don't worry. I will take good care of you. Pan Tai nearly fainted on the spot. Dingen closed the door, slinging her basket over her shoulder to buy groceries. She purchased 2 pounds of meat, a large grass carp, then went to the village shop for 2 pounds of wine, and finally gathered a basket of vegetables from the garden, returning to prepare a sumptuous feast. She then set out a bowl of meat, a bowl of fish, a bowl of rice, and a bowl of tofu, and left Ayan Panja village. There was a hillside designated for burials. Standing atop the hill, Dingen gazed down at the village, narrowing her eyes with a smile. Sister, Ayasanti, this place splendid? You stand above them. Watching how they live, Ayasanti had said that women are of lower status. Ha! You stand atop their heads. Before her lay nothing but a modest mound of earth, beside which stood a small, evergreen sapling. In front of her lay the meal she had brought. Eat, sister. I want to be able to see you anymore. Don't dwell on me. Go on and be reborn. Don't live as a human. It is too exhausting. Second sister, keep an eye on big sister. She is simple-minded and easily deceived. Sister, the wind swirled, scattering leaves everywhere. Ayasanti, that Pan Xiao Wu? Where is she rushing off to in such a hurry? As she passed by the entrance of the village, she spotted the amiable Mr. Pan, who was returning with a load of cow dung. With a cheerful smile, he inquired, What brings you here? Grandpa, I went to Nyoja village to visit my sister. Today is her birthday, Dingen replied, carrying her basket and approaching him with a smile. Mr. Pan seemed to be the only person who showed her kindness. Just as she was leaving, she happened upon Tianjin's family, who were betrothed to Pan Xiao. Tianjin watched her as she gradually walked away, her graceful figure swaying in the wind, an image that lingered in his mind long after in the stillness of the night. In Nyoja village, Pan Dachuan hesitated several times before finally speaking. Xiao Wu, do you still harbor resentment towards your sister? After a long silence, she replied, Second sister is gone. In the darkness, Dingen's wide eyes looked vacant and dazed. Pan Dachuan seemed momentarily lost for words. What happened to Dong Dong? Where has she gone? After a while, she finally came to her senses and burst into tears. Why did she have to leave? Why did she leave so soon? In the dim light, she sat at the edge of the bed, covering her mouth as she sobbed softly. After a time, when her tears had subsided, she choked out, I told the clan elder that I wanted to give you the family house as a dowry. The elder agreed, but said that Dong Dong had to leave. She hiccuped. I thought she could stay here for a while. Treasure, don't hate your sister. Tears streamed down as Pan Dachuan sat there silently weeping, murmuring, Dong Dong, why did you leave? Why didn't you let me see you one last time? Dong Dong, do you resent me? Stop crying, Dingen asked calmly. What do I need that house for? You have nothing, no dowry, and our family is still in disarray. What good family would want to marry you? This is how it is. Your second sister is already ruined. I cannot delay you any longer. Having that house would make the marriage proposal sound better. The rice you gave me was meant to persuade someone to speak well of you. Sister Ayasanti, foolish. Sister cares for you the most. Dingen sat up, staring blankly at her. It dawned on her that throughout her life, her eldest sister had always chosen her. Eldest sister, why are you so good to me? Because I am your eldest sister. A sister is like a mother. I have held you in my arms since you were born. I have never forgotten how you cried out in hunger, sucking on your fingers. I raised you through all your stumbles. You were my first child, Pan Dachuan responded once more, her heart now a tumult of emotions. Unlike the anger she had felt before. Someone has always wanted to protect me, yet in doing so, she has hurt another innocent soul, leaving her with a bittersweet feeling. The next day, as the sun rose high in the sky, a figure rushed into Panja village, shouting, Pan Maisie, Pan Maisie, something has happened at your home. Nyo Dashu, carrying a basket of pig fodder, wiped the sweat from his brow and asked loudly, What is wrong? Who are you looking for? I am looking for Pan Maisie, Panda gasped, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. Pan Maisie? Who is that? Nyo Dashu's expression darkened. Whose family are you from? I am from Panja village, Panda hurriedly replied. Nyo brother-in-law by age, I should still call you brother-in-law. Is Xiao Wu here? Oh. Nyo Dashu's expression softened. She is in the house with her sister. Although Dingen was not his biological sister, he had watched her grow up. She was obedient and understanding, and he felt pity for her sister. Dachuan had helped her countless times during her pregnancy, and he had long regarded her as his own sister. Those with daughters often viewed any young man with suspicion. What has happened? Why are you so frantic? Nyo Dashu opened the door. Dachuan, someone from Panja village is here. You should check if something has happened. Pan Dachuan emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Is that you, Panda? What is wrong? What could possibly happen in our home? Dingen stood in the shadow of the doorway, cradling the child in her arms, gently curving her lips as she hummed a tune. Stone. Oh, Stone, grow up slowly, don't be anxious. If you rush, your heart may go awry. Outside, Panda drank a bowl of water and wiped his mouth. Both Pambo and Pandague are dead. What? Pan Dachuan's legs weakened, nearly collapsing to the ground. Dingen smiled, looking at the innocent face of the infant, tears suddenly streaming down her cheeks. It's good they are dead. It's good they are dead. Finally, they are gone. Now the world will be peaceful again. She stood there, her lips curled upwards, yet tears flowed silently down her face. The sunlight at the doorway felt like it was separated by an entire world. In Panja village, a crowd had gathered at the entrance, and upon seeing the Pan sisters arrive, they instinctively parted to make way. The village chief's expression was grim as he paced back and forth at the door, his demeanor revealing frustration and agitation. Where is Pan Xiaowu? Why hasn't Tishi returned? He shouted, abandoning his usual calm demeanor, appearing irritable and restless. Just as Dingen was about to step forward, Pan Dachuan grabbed her arm. Hesitating as she moved closer, village chief, what do you want with Xiaowu? Someone has died at home. Where is she? The village chief asked through gritted teeth. Village chief, what use is it to find Xiaowu if someone has died? Pan Dachuan stammered, glancing at Dingen. Dingen squeezed her hand, suddenly feeling emboldened. Report to the authorities, she said, her voice hesitant yet resolute. Report what? What authorities? Is your family running the government? The clan elder emerged, leaning on his cane, scolding, his icy gaze fixated on Dingen. Where have you been? His eyes were as cold as a snake's flickering tongue. Pan Dachuan trembled in fear, gripping Dingen's hand tightly. Elder, yesterday was my birthday. Xiaowu came to visit me in the afternoon. She just returned today. Didn't he ask you? The elder snapped, jabbing the ground with his cane. Pan Xiaowu, where have you been? Gripped with fear, Dingen took a deep breath, reassuring Pan Dachuan with a comforting pat on her back. Stepping forward, I went to my sister's house and didn't he come back last night? Did anyone see you? He demanded, his furious gaze sweeping over the crowd. Elder, I saw her. An elder from the Pan family interjected. Yesterday afternoon, when I was returning with cow dung, I saw Pan Xiaowu heading towards Nyoja village. Mr. Pan wiped the sweat from his brow, fearing they wouldn't believe him. When she left, the village chief's in-laws were also departing, just in opposite directions. What time was that? It was past the hour of Shun. The clan elder turned to the village chief, who nodded. The Tian family left around the same time. It seems he isn't lying. What did you do yesterday? The elder inquired, softening his tone as he fixed his gaze on Dingen. I made lunch for my father. He wanted to drink, but I didn't serve him, so he ran out yelling. Coincidentally, it was my sister's birthday, so I bought extra food and brought 2 bowls to visit her. Dingen surveyed the onlookers, speaking slowly and deliberately. There's no need to panic. Everything I said is the truth. She looked ahead, her defiant gaze causing Pan Dachuan to feel a pang of sympathy. Elder, the Pan family said they heard noises last night. It seems Pandague accidentally killed Pan Tai before he fell to his death. The village chief pulled the elder aside for a discussion. After a long pause, the elder looked up at him, his eyes reflecting indifference and greed. He sighed and asked, why not invite a coroner to take a look? The people from the mortuary have already checked. They said there was nothing unusual. The village chief shook his head, rejecting the elder's suggestion. Perhaps we should just let them handle the burial. You've already made the decision. Why ask me? The elder's face darkened. You decide. By the way, since the Pan family has been wiped out, leaving only an unmarried daughter, let her keep the house as a dowry. Elder, that's not acceptable. The village chief, displeased, responded. How can you keep meddling in everything? You ask him to take the lead, yet you still want to question him about everything. The elder glared at him in silence. Dingen approached the door, looking at the village chief with a mocking smile. Village chief, this house is quite well built. Isn't it? It was built with the money my second sister earned from selling herself. If you think my sister is dirty, why don't you find that silver tainted? Pan Shao Wu. The village chief's irritated expression deepened. This is my family's house. If you want it, fine. My sister's body is buried in the yard. I am not afraid. I'll sell it to you. Who would want your house? The village chief replied disdainfully, turning to leave, though he cast a regretful glance at the courtyard built of blue bricks. Truly a shame, village chief. I'll come by to register my household. Don't start saying this and that again. The village chief was furious, smoke almost rising from his head, and he could only wave his hand dismissively as he stormed off. Chapter 54. Elder, could you not restrain yourself? What is the point of restraining? Is it just for show? Dingen entered the kitchen, only to find a scene of what her ears buzzed momentarily, her mind blank. Her body standing still while her soul seemed to float aimlessly in the ether, engulfed in a haze of confusion. It was so surreal, absurd enough to provoke laughter. Good heavens! Upon seeing her, Pan Dachuan's legs turned to jelly, collapsing to the ground. Just recovering her senses, Dingen was startled by the commotion, turning around in alarm and hastily supporting her. Sister? Are you all right? It's just fear. Pan Dachuan gazed at her sister, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pounded her chest. Crying out, darling, I'm so scared. Dingen crouched down, clasping her hand, and softly reassured, Sister, don't think about it. Look, everything is fine. Besides, it truly wasn't me. Pan Dachuan hesitated, looking up at her. Not you? Dingen nodded. I left after preparing the meal. Never expecting them to react this way, I thought they would certainly flee. I reasoned that instead of watching them grow weary of each other, it would be better to let them escape. Dingen spoke with conviction, yet Pan Dachuan remained unconvinced. Darling, it really wasn't you. Dingen nodded vigorously. She had indeed done nothing but added a little something to the wine. Only then did Pan Dachuan breathe a sigh of relief. As though escaping death itself, there was nothing more to it. Dingen had merely given the funeral home a few coins to remove the body, to be buried haphazardly. The clan elders stormed in, vehemently scolding Dingen for her lack of filial piety. I have no money. If you are willing to provide the silver, then tell me what to do, and I shall comply, Dingen retorted. Causing the clan elder to fall silent, that afternoon, the sky was overcast. Dingen secured the front door with an iron chain, then turned and walked away, never glancing back. Pan Dachuan stood at a distance, tears streaming down her face. Nyo Dashu, holding a child, stood beside her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. If you can't bear to see her go, just tell her not to. Our family can always accommodate another pair of chopsticks. Look at you, as if I were the one driving her away. You wouldn't understand. Pan Dachuan wiped her tears, shaking her head. How could you possibly comprehend a daughter's feelings? What nonsense is this? Nyo Dashu looked at her in confusion. What are you crying about? I'm crying for my sister. Pan Dachuan cried out, her voice trembling, filled with helplessness and fear. I never even got to see her one last time before she died. And now she is left. I have no idea whether she is alive or dead. She had 4 sisters, and now only this one remained. The thought alone pierced her heart, and no matter how painful it was. Life was relentless, and one could only endure the suffering. In Xiangxiang County, the magistrate looked at the two of them with a pained expression. Before I met you two, I thought the world was quite peaceful. Shu Sheng quipped back, Sir, is it enjoyable to deceive oneself? The magistrate, glaring at him, felt an overwhelming urge to silence him with a brick. Why must you speak such harsh truths? Can't you allow the magistrate some amusement? Qianya, unable to bear it any longer, tugged at Shu Sheng's sleeve. Enough, you two. The magistrate slammed the table in anger, declaring, I give you both 3 days to apprehend the murderer, or you shall not leave Xiangxiang County. The furious magistrate's wrath was indeed a sight to behold. Shu Sheng was left dumbfounded. Sir, have you forgotten? I'm just a weak scholar. What does that have to do with me? The magistrate scoffed, sweeping his sleeves as he departed. I am not jesting. As he left, he cast a sidelong glance at Qianya, who was mindlessly swatting at mosquitoes. Why not use a ready-made expert? Are you waiting for dinner? Alas, Shu Sheng sighed, leaning against Qianya's shoulder. What should we do, Qianya? I still feel nauseous. Qianya raised an eyebrow, astonished. Isn't it just one meal? Didn't you throw it all up? Yes, but I still feel uncomfortable in my stomach. Shusheng grimaced, pressing his belly. Don't overthink it. Human flesh is just meat, no different from pork. Qinya comforted him. Consider this. Wolves, tigers, bears, do they not eat people? In their eyes, humans are no different from rabbits. Just treat it like a delicacy. Qinya chuckled mischievously. This human flesh is quite nourishing. Old Madame Jean has a large chunk left in the kitchen. Why not go home and indulge? Shusheng shot her a sidelong glance. No, I'm currently on a vegetarian diet. Qinya shook her head, her resolve unwavering. Since when? How come I wasn't aware? Just decided. You aren't on a 3-day vegetarian diet, are you? Indeed. Have some shame. It turned out, the previous day, the two had rested at the inn, and in the evening went out to stroll through the night market to strengthen their bond, only to encounter old Madame Jean, who had come out with her entire family to ward off bad luck. Upon seeing them, the old lady trembled with excitement. Miss Ming, Miss Ming! Qinya, who had intended to sneak away, had no choice but to approach with a strained smile. Old Madam, you are here too. Shusheng quietly laughed at her, thinking her utterly useless for being afraid of a toothless old woman. Thank you, dear girl. Old Madame Jean grasped her hand, her voice filled with emotion. If it weren't for this kind girl, my family would have perished behind her. Her son supported the elderly man, while her daughter-in-law held their grandson. Upon hearing the old lady's words, they all gathered around, sincerely thanking the girl for her great kindness. This display frightened Qinya, who felt as if she were facing a bandit, and she instinctively shrank back, awkwardly waving her hands. I did nothing. Nothing at all. It was just a chance encounter. If it had been anyone else, they would have surely helped too. The crowd watched, and Qinya wished she could flee. Not necessarily, old Madame Jean huffed, pulling her hand. I truly want to thank you. Lifting her gaze, she spotted Shusheng standing nearby and asked, You two mentioned needing to go to Yian County for business. Was it successful? Shusheng, feeling a bit smug, glanced at the silent figure beside him and nodded. It has been taken care of. Oh, then come to my house for a visit. Saying this, the old lady dragged Qinya away. Shusheng hurriedly intervened. Old madam, it's quite late. We should be on our way to rest. Nonsense. Now that you've taken her away, who will hold her tonight? Yes, Qinya nodded vigorously. Old madam, it's late. We shouldn't trouble you. Not late. Not late at all. Old Madame Jean gazed at her, suddenly reaching out to touch her face. What a wonderful girl. How come I only have one son? Otherwise, I would have to scheme to bring you back. Qinya was immediately horrified. Shusheng, equally alarmed, felt an overwhelming urge to rescue the poor Qinya. Hee. Qinya chuckled nervously. Old madam, you certainly have a sense of humor. You don't believe me? Old Madame Jean pouted. I genuinely wish to thank you. Thanks to you, my husband and grandson's illnesses have improved. Shusheng glanced back. The old man still looked somewhat haggard, carefully supported by his son, while the grandson was cradled by his daughter-in-law, his eyes bright with vitality. If you hadn't mentioned that remedy, they wouldn't have recovered so swiftly. It turned out that day, Qinya had casually remarked about having seen Master Kurigane save someone in a similar condition. Unable to keep food down, old Madame Jean took it to heart. Meanwhile, Qinya had finally managed to dissuade old Madame Jean from insisting she visit her home, promising to see her the next day. Old Madame Jean eyed her suspiciously. You won't sneak away, will you? Hee. Qinya chuckled foolishly. How could I? In truth, that was precisely what she intended. That night, feeling dejected, Qinya kicked Shusheng out. The following day, Qinya dilly-dallied, finally arriving at noon, having planned to slip away at mealtime. However, old Madame Jin's son announced that he had bought a large chunk of pork to make dumplings. Qinya leaned against Shusheng, her brows furrowed in distress. Unable to bear it, Shusheng remarked, Someone is inviting you to eat dumplings, yet you look like you've been tortured. It's too overwhelming. I'm not used to such warmth, Qinya mumbled. Having grown up in a temple, she always viewed the world with a sense of confusion and trepidation. It's all right. Shusheng tilted his head, affectionately bumping his forehead against hers. He took her hand, long and well-formed, and found it quite alluring. Almost wanting to bite it. Leaning against him, Qinya squinted and tilted her head, grinning foolishly. Old Madame Jin's daughter-in-law, Qin, was in the kitchen kneading dough. With the window facing outside, she lifted her head and remarked, Mother, isn't this enough dough? We should add more. There are so many people. Old Madame Jean glanced over but continued chopping meat. Qin opened the cupboard and rummaged for whole wheat flour. The old lady quickly called out, "Only use white flour. Don't mix that in. But this is all the white flour we have." Qin frowned, feeling troubled. Old Madame Jean quickly cracked 2 eggs into the meat mixture. "That's all there is?" "Mother, hurry up. Do I need to teach you how to knead dough?" Old Madame Jean was busy with her hands. Seeing the large amount of filling, Qin felt a pang of sympathy. "I'll go buy some cabbage." "Buy cabbage for what?" Old Madame Jean was displeased. Usually aware of her daughter-in-law's frugality, she felt this was rather petty. Your father and Cheng's lives were saved by her. We should treat her properly instead of skimping. "Mother, she only said a few words," Qin murmured to herself, wondering what the girl was truly after. Recalling the earlier scene, she curled her lip in disdain. What could an old lady like me possibly want? Madame Jean was rather incensed. Ever since her daughter-in-law had asked her for money and she had declined, a certain stinginess seemed to have emerged. What could they possibly gain from me? If uttering a few words could save your father and Chang'er, I would treat them with the same kindness, whether for 1 meal or 10. They possess both sentiment and loyalty, willing to share remedies with you, yet you flit about from one family to another without ever bringing back a cure. This household was built through the toil and sweat of your father and me. So if you have the ability, go earn a mountain of silver instead of constantly fixating on me. What future do you have? Madame Jean slammed the garlic down heavily, the sound startling Qin's heart. Chapter 55. Come, let us eat dumplings. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law brought several plates of dumplings to the table. Seeing the spread, Qin felt a pang of sympathy. She fetched a large bowl, filling it to the brim, leaving a significant gap on the table where the dumplings had been arranged. At tea that moment, Madame Jin's face turned cold. She glanced at Qinya, suppressing her anger and choosing not to humiliate her daughter-in-law in front of outsiders. Qin pressed down on the dumplings, finally satisfied, and said, "Mother, I'll take some to Chang'er. He is still in the room studying." For the sake of her grandson, Madame Jean merely nodded coldly, telling her to rest her eyes. Qin hurried off, fearing she might be called back. Qinya sighed, observing the contrasting attitudes, one welcoming, the other resentful. Beneath the table, Shusheng shook her hand gently, whispering that her approval was enough. Qinya lightly stepped on his foot, lowering her head, her ears turning red. Shusheng made exaggerated expressions, playfully rubbing his foot. Come, eat while it's hot." Old Master Jean cheerfully beckoned them. Noticing that the two were merely watching him without picking up their chopsticks, he laughed, adding more wrinkles to his face, and took the initiative to grab one, urging them to eat quickly. It would lose its flavor if left to cool. "Where's the vinegar?" Shusheng placed one in his bowl, glancing around. "Tea must be that my wife is too busy to remember." Madame Jean paused, smacking her forehead and forcing a smile, while inwardly cursing her daughter-in-law for being so stingy as to forget the vinegar. "Mother, I'll go." Brother Jean quickly stood up, saying that she should rest her waist. "I'll go." Qinya stood as well, wanting to add a few drops of soy sauce. "Sure, little sister, go ahead and help yourself." Compared to the somewhat stingy Qin, Brother Jean's personality was unexpectedly straightforward. Or perhaps just a bit dense. As Qinya entered the kitchen, she found it impeccably tidy, with various condiments arranged neatly, quite clean. It seemed both the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law took pride in cleanliness. Whereas the vinegar? She glanced around, only to turn and see a large piece of meat hanging from the beam. Estimating, it must weigh at least 3 to 4 Jin. Just how much meat did Brother Jean buy? "Miss Ming," Qin called from the doorway after watching for a moment. "Huh." Fortunately, Qinya's ears were sharp, or she might have been startled. What a peculiar behavior, standing at the door in silence. "What are you looking for?" Qin asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Qinya raised an eyebrow. "Looking for vinegar. Could it be that you have gold here as well?" Haha, the girl is indeed quite forthright. Sister Jean is rather subtle in nature. Can't one speak plainly? "Is this vinegar?" She reached to take it, but Qin quickly interjected. I'll do it, observing the vinegar barely covering the bottom of the bowl. Qinya muttered just loud enough. "Didn't I hear the old lady say the family was so poor they couldn't even afford vinegar? Had I known, I would have insisted on leaving." Qin's face twitched. "Haha, I was afraid you would find it sour, Sister Jean." If you don't eat vinegar, there are still 4 people over there. This amount, are we supposed to fight over it? She poured out more than half the bowl, leaving Qin dumbfounded. Just as she turned to leave, Qinya noticed that piece of meat again, its color a delicate pink, with intricate marbling. She quietly mused. This pig seems quite lean, as she sat back down. Qinya picked up her chopsticks. Qin approached and sat down, asking, Miss Ming, can you tell me how you learned about that remedy? Qinya shot her a sidelong glance and silently put down her chopsticks. Indeed, Brother Jean looked at her gratefully. I must thank Miss Ming for my father's and son's ailments. The elderly couple also looked at her with keen interest, their expectations palpable. About 10 years ago, I accompanied a renowned monk to beg for alms. At that time, the man of that household was writhing on the ground, clutching his stomach in pain. The doctor stood helplessly by, while the woman berated him for being a quack, scamming them for money. Qinya had then asked, Did you give him any money? The woman replied that since they hadn't cured the illness, why should she pay anything? If she hadn't given money, why blame others for being fraudulent? Qinya didn't understand. Master Kurigane rolled up his sleeves and approached, pressing on the man's belly, carefully checking his pulse and examining his tongue. Stating that he could cure him, the woman immediately asked, Is there a fee? The master shook his head, saying he required a donation of 1 jin of rice instead, which the woman begrudgingly agreed to after some hesitation. He instructed her to gather a lot of garlic, peel it, mash it into a paste, and have him consume it. Qinya turned her head to see Shu Sheng picking up a dumpling, dipping it, and taking a bite. When he noticed her looking, he grinned and placed one in her bowl. Subsequently, the man vomited a considerable amount of slimy substance. She opened the dumpling, fiddling with it, momentarily losing her appetite. Qin devoured dumplings at a rapid pace. Her plate already empty, at least she ate with some decorum. Well then, little sister, what was the cause of that illness? Why couldn't the doctor identify it? Brother Jean was puzzled. Qinya picked up a dumpling, inspecting the filling with rapt attention. When she heard his question, she snapped back to reality. Spring is precisely the season for consuming chives and similar vegetables, which are often grown near water. Creatures like snakes prefer to mate near water. Where they gather, they leave behind things resembling dead snake eggs on the vegetables. If not washed properly and ingested, they could hatch in the warmth of the human body, resulting in that slimy substance that expands within the stomach. Shu Sheng set down his chopsticks, feeling somewhat nauseous, casting a resentful glance at Qinya, who had just eaten one. Old Master Jean patted his chest. Feeling queasy. No wonder I vomited that stuff. Truly, it's tormenting. Enough. Why dwell on that? Madame Jean quickly patted his back, pouring him a cup of water. Brother Jean asked, Father, how did you end up eating that? How would I know? Old Master Jean huffed, angrily declaring, I can't cook, Mother. You were the one cooking that day? Brother Jean inquired. Madame Jean was at a loss for words, giving a faint glance at her daughter-in-law, who lowered her head, fiddling with her chopsticks, too embarrassed to speak. Speak. Brother Jean followed her gaze, landing on the guilty Qin, glaring at her. I was in a hurry to return to my family and just washed it quickly. Qin stammered, her head bowed. You? Brother Jean was furious, wanting to scold her. All right, it's all in the past. Let us count our blessings from this misfortune, Madame Jean sighed, secretly relieved that she hadn't eaten lunch that day due to her stomach discomfort. And her son had gone to work. Be more careful in the future, Madame Jean warned nonchalantly. It's not that her daughter-in-law was unclean, but sometimes she was just too hasty. You are not allowed to return to your family this year. Brother Jean glared, his tall stature imposing. Qin felt a bit frightened and obediently nodded, her guilt evident. Shu Sheng watched with great interest, secretly laughing. What is the point of fussing over meals? You've brought this upon yourself. He happily grabbed a dumpling to eat, but Qinya suddenly pressed down, saying, Wait, why does this not look like pork? Brother Jean, did you buy pork? Her question made Brother Jean visibly perplexed. He had been calling for meat without specifying the type. I asked if it was pork, and he didn't say it wasn't, did he? What's wrong with the meat? He asked nervously. Madame Jean squinted at the dumpling filling for quite a while. How much did you pay for this meat? 7 per jin. It totaled 6.5 jin. So it came to 42 . Seeing it was cheap, he bought 2 pieces at once. Suddenly, Qinya stood up and walked to the kitchen. Madame Jean muttered with narrowed eyes. Why is this meat so cheap? Something doesn't seem right. The current market price for pork is around 12 wen. It couldn't possibly be spoiled. Right? Old Master Jean mumbled. It was quite tasty just now. Perhaps it was simply a bargain. Mother, it's fine. Eat up. Jean wasn't concerned. Having eaten so much, she felt perfectly fine. Qinya entered the kitchen with a blank expression, only to see Shusheng about to pop a dumpling into his mouth. She swiftly knocked it away. Shusheng looked at her in confusion. There are still so many here. Don't take mine. Qinya looked down at him, her gaze tinged with pity. Have you eaten yet? I had one. Shusheng nodded, dazed. Qinya replied, Congratulations, based on my years of hunting, this is not the meat of any animal. What is it? Shusheng gasped, holding his chopsticks in disbelief. Qinya patted his back, winking at him. He shook his head in confusion. The family of four stared in shock. Human flesh, a great tonic. Qinya sighed, casually placing a bowl in front of him. Human flesh? Shusheng observed her serious expression, devoid of any hint of jest, and a wave of nausea surged within him. Ugh, Qinya, please don't. Ugh. He clutched her sleeve, trying to ascertain whether she was deceiving him. Suddenly, old Master Jean doubled over and retched violently. How could it be human flesh? Miss Ming wouldn't dare to make such a reckless claim. Jean sure couldn't believe it. How could there possibly be human meat in a perfectly fine situation? Qianyi looked at her, shaking her head in silence, her eyes filled with pity, causing Shusheng's hair to stand on end. Father, ugh, Big Brother Jean, while heaving, rushed to support his father. Granny Jean slumped over in her chair, retching painfully. Qianyi, why would you deceive me? Ugh. It's not a lie. No one is tricking her, yes, just that she had a plate of human meat dumplings. Ugh. She collapsed onto the ground, violently expelling the contents of her stomach. What is that smell? Jean Chong emerged holding an empty bowl, and upon seeing the chaos around him, the rancid scent instantly made him retch. Your father bought human flesh thinking it was pork. Granny Jean gasped for breath as she spoke, and no sooner had she finished than another round of retching ensued. Qianyi wiped her face, enveloped by the sounds of vomiting, and felt bile rise in her throat. Ugh! Just then, Big Brother Jean, feeling faint from the vomiting, suddenly remembered, exclaiming, the family ahead also bought some. By the time Qianyi rushed over to inform them, another household was already consuming it, resulting in yet another mess. Chapter 56. Exiting the county office. The two squatted at the street corner, sighing, what should we do? Shusheng shook his head, equally clueless. Qianyi felt overwhelmed. Who would have thought that a meal could result in human flesh? He gazed longingly at the steamy bun shop across the street, his mouth watering. Are we eating? Qianyi inquired. Shusheng nodded, looking at her expectantly. Qianyi was perplexed. If you want to eat, why are you squatting here? Aren't you going to buy some? Shusheng, astonished, replied. Why are you asking me if you're not buying? No, I meant for you to go buy. Qianyi produced some silver and handed it to him. Gesturing, hurry. All right, Shusheng resignedly stood up, accepting the silver. Just get some red bean buns and steamed buns. How many do you want, hero? How many do they have left? The bun shop owner counted the buns while discreetly glancing at him. Suddenly, his face fell into confusion. Oh no, how many did I just count? 32 red bean buns and 47 steamed buns. Shusheng looked at him, urging, can you be quicker? Fine, fine. After staring at Shusheng for a while, the owner finally couldn't hold back. How many of you are eating? 2. Shusheng replied without a hint of emotion. Point 2. The owner's gaze was one of disbelief. Why the discrimination? No, it's just that if everyone were like you, I would have struck it rich long ago. The owner lamented, fiddling with his abacus. 1 steamed bun is 1 won, and 2 red bean buns are 3 won each. 47 steamed buns cost 47 won, and 32 red bean buns come to a total of 98 won. The owner sighed with relief as if he had just escaped a great danger. Shusheng looked at him. With your calculating skills, you'll be rich one day. He handed over 9 won and 5 won. Hey, that's short, the owner exclaimed. Why didn't you say you miscalculated? If you can't even do this simple math, you might as well hire an accountant. Shusheng walked over, took the abacus, and clicked the beads. Steamed buns are 47 won, and each red bean bun is 1.5 won. 432 of them. That's 48 wen. In total. It's 95 won. Is that so? The owner murmured, clutching the abacus, furrowing his brow as he vigorously counted the beads. 1 steamed bun is 1 47 steamed buns. Xu Sheng was left speechless and turned to leave. Realizing that with the owner's calculating skills, he would never find wealth in this lifetime. Before he could step away, he suddenly halted and jumped back, eyes wide with terror. What are you eating? Stinky tofu. Qianyi exclaimed, taking a bite. It's so fragrant. Haha. Xu Sheng looked at her in disbelief. Throw it away? Why? Qianyi protested. It's too smelly. Xu Sheng pinched his nose, recoiling. Why are you acting like Dingen? Qianyi shot him a sideways glance. Dingen? Who asked that? Xu Sheng feigned ignorance, refusing to let her distract him. Quick, throw it away. The smell is unbearable. He felt as though he might faint from the stench. Qianyi shook her head. This is a miraculous remedy. A remedy that stinks this much? Xu Sheng scoffed. Are you trying to trick me? Are human meat dumplings delicious? She raised an eyebrow, a wicked smile on her face. Eat this and I guarantee you'll forget all about the human meat dumplings. Xu Sheng's expression changed rapidly as he clutched his chest, feeling nauseous. I just managed to forget. Could you please not remind me? Seizing the opportunity while he spoke, Qianyi swiftly leaned in and stuffed a piece of stinky tofu into his mouth. His eyes widened in shock, first showing fear, then confusion, and finally delight as he chewed. This? You can't judge a book by its cover. His eyes sparkled as he exclaimed, Get me another piece. Isn't it stinky? Qianyi raised an eyebrow at him. Xu Sheng grinned. Even farts are stinky. They still have to be released. You can shut up now. Qianyi glanced into the bowl, reluctantly saying, You should go buy some. I don't want to share. Is that how you are? Xu Sheng glared at her. Qianyi hesitated but nodded. You fickle, heartless. Xu Sheng pointed at her, feigning heartbreak. You can't have any of the buns. He took a bite of the red bean bun, his misty eyes glancing at her, as though she were a heartless villain who would abandon him after securing her own comfort. I'm just teaching you not to speak too harshly. At least leave a way out. Handing him the bowl, Qianyi took a bundle and bit into it. But, hero, can you really eat so much? Xu Sheng asked, taking a moment to inquire amidst the chaos. No, I'll keep it for rations. What do you mean? Xu Sheng gasped, then chuckled. Qianyi, are you saying we should sneak away together? Just thinking about it feels thrilling. No, I'm escaping. You stay. Qianyi corrected him. No, Qianyi. Xu Sheng couldn't believe it. You actually want to leave me behind? The last word rose to a pitch that nearly shattered the heavens. Calm down. Magistrate Ning only asked you to stay. Qianyi felt sympathetic. The magistrate specifically requested your assistance in solving the case. And you? I'll go back. Qianyi looked at him quizzically. Otherwise, why would I stay? With that, she elegantly slung her bundle over her shoulder and turned to leave. In a way, I want to allow it. Xu Sheng clung to her desperately. You can't leave unless you take me with you. Otherwise, we'll stay together. Let go. Not a chance. Do you dare hit me? If you do, I'll accuse you of harassment. Qianyi stared at him, aghast. Who asked the woman here? In broad daylight, can't we have a bit of dignity? Jin Zhe, passing by with a packet of snacks, stood at a distance watching them with disdain. What's wrong? Qianyi glanced at the items in his hands. Did your wife come back? Can you not bring up irrelevant topics? Jin Zhe glared at her expressionlessly. Can you two refrain from speaking so freely? He looked thoroughly disgusted. How come speaking the truth is such an offense these days? Qianyi retorted. You need to get used to it. Kind words can cut deeper than knives, Xu Sheng added. And the two stood there, looking down on him with smug satisfaction. Jin Zhe, exasperated, spat out, I wish you two would become siblings in the end. He said it through gritted teeth. Thank you. Cousins are still family. The two exchanged glances. Xu Sheng winked, and Qianyi nodded, rolling up her sleeves as she approached. Jin Zhe, seeing this, nervously stepped back. What are you planning to do? In broad daylight, under the clear sky, don't do anything reckless. Bookworm, are you going to intervene or not? As Qianyi's fierce expression drew near, he hastily raised his voice. Xu Sheng spread his hands, shaking his head. Do you think it's more realistic for either of us to manage the other? Jin Zhe looked at them in terror and fled. Just as he lifted his leg, Qianyi punched him, rendering him dazed, and then dragged him away. I seem to remember we have no grievances. Crouching in a dead end, Jin Zhe felt a bit frantic. Why did he have to speak out of turn? Xu Sheng crossed his arms. watching coolly. Don't worry, we're not out to kill or rob anyone. Nor are we here to force anyone into a life of vice. Qianyi threatened, her fingers cracking ominously as she approached. And we want to retaliate, they said in unison. Then what do you want? Jinzei clutched his chest, looking as if they were a pair of thuggish ruffians. We just want to inquire about something. Xu Shang winked at him, then found a clean spot to sit, patting the space beside him, nodding at Jinzei and offering a steamed bun. Big brother Jin. Want one? If it's a matter, it's big Uncle Jin. You think a single bun can bribe me? Can I even eat it? Is it poisoned? Jinzei accepted it with disdain. You think I would be fooled by a single bun? No poison. It's too wasteful for you. Qianyi scoffed. Unable to fight back or curse, Jinzei could only glare in frustration. Biting into the bun now, tell me what you want to ask. How long have you been in Tanxiang County? I have lived as many years as I have in Tansang County. The two exchanged glances. And then Shushing inquired, has there been some recent incident in the county? Indeed. How did you know? This news should have been kept under wraps by the county office to prevent public panic. Kept under wraps? Shushing mused, realizing the calm demeanor of the county magistrate at that time had been rather peculiar. Tell me what you know. Thus, the three of them huddled in a corner, sharing intelligence. This matter had been ongoing for quite some time. It was said that every fortnight, a skeletal remains would appear in a dilapidated house in the northern city, not of natural decay, but rather. The flesh had been meticulously scraped away. Upon witnessing the bones, Jinzei had been horrified. They treat human beings like pigs. How long has this been happening? How many have died? To my knowledge, there have already been 5. Jinzei sighed. Other than the head, every other part of the body has been stripped clean. No, it's already the 6th. Shushing's expression turned grave, and then quietly recounted the events, concluding with, the flesh was very fresh. Given the current weather, it cannot be more than a day old. Yet the remains have not been found, Brother Jin. Please elaborate on what you know. Jinzei scoffed. What else with you? Not calling me uncle anymore? He chuckled dryly. Once Jinzei finished, he noticed the two opposite him whispering to each other. Qianyi remarked, this person treats murder as casually as slaughtering pigs. Shusheng replied, I suspect the perpetrator is a butcher. Exactly. If one intends to kill, there will be bloodshed. Who else would wield a knife and be drenched in blood while selling meat? It's impossible that there are no leads. It's just too plausible. Overlooked by others. Upon hearing this, Qianyi scratched her head in frustration. Are we supposed to apprehend every butcher? How troublesome. I haven't even eaten yet. With that thought, she stuffed a red bean bun into her mouth. Shusheng squeezed over and snatched one away. No need for such trouble. This individual is likely a recluse. Qianyi nodded in agreement. Moreover, he must be quite tall and has been slaughtering pigs for a considerable time. Without a certain level of skill, one cannot clean a bone so thoroughly. Just as Jinzei was eating his steamed bun, he paused. Now that you mention it, someone comes to mind. Suddenly, his face contorted in terror as he leaped up. Oh no, Lin Yang and Rue. In a state of panic, he dashed off. The mere thought sent shivers down his spine. Could it be that ill fate had befallen his wife and daughter at the hands of that individual? Qianyi pondered, observing his retreating figure. Shusheng, while munching on the red bean bun, shook his head. I suspect that the murderer lives quite close to him, and he might even know him. What terrible luck! The two exchanged glances. Speaking in unison, what is it like to have a neighbor who enjoys selling human flesh? They dared not dwell on it, lest they feel that every bite of meat they had consumed in the past was. Chapter 57. Lin Yang. Where is Rue? Jinzei burst in, trembling as he questioned the woman busy by the well. The plump Lin Yang looked rosy and was washing glutinous rice. Upon hearing his words, she looked up. She is playing with Xiao Wu and Xiaowen at Uncle Dao's house. I just want to check on them. Though she said this, she still rose to dry her hands. Preparing to take a look, upon lifting her gaze, Jinzei had already bolted out the door. The deepest house in the alley belonged to Dao Feng, who had both a front and a back door. The front door led directly to his meat stall, while the back opened into the alley. Faster, faster. At that moment, Jinzei wished he could sprout a pair of wings. Rue. He stood at the entrance, reaching out to push the door open, fear coiling around his neck like a serpent, tightening its grip. Rue. He crashed through the door, frantically searching the yard like a headless fly. The vacant yard held no one. But the mud by the wall appeared darker, resembling blood at that moment. His legs turned to jelly, and with a trembling voice, he called out, "Rue, Rue." His daughter, his precious girl who he had thought lost. With bloodshot eyes, Jin Zhe staggered up, turning to look back. Lin Yang hurried over. Seeing his tense expression filled with murderous intent, she fearfully asked, "Jin Zhe, what's wrong? Where is Rue, Rue? You need to go back." Jin Zhe said with chilling calmness, his gaze hollow, fists clenched tightly. "What are you going to do?" Lin Yang was exceedingly anxious, grabbing him tightly, her voice trembling. "Where is our daughter? Don't speak. Don't speak." Jin Zhe pushed her away, spotting Qinya and Shusheng approaching. He walked over. "Qinya, lend me a knife." Both were startled. Shusheng was about to speak when he caught sight of Jin Zhe's bloodshot eyes and was immediately taken aback. Qinya handed him the knife, saying, "Wishing you swift success." "No," Shusheng exclaimed, watching as he wordlessly took the knife. His face dark as a ghost. Entering the house, in a panic, he urged, "Qinya, how could you give him the knife? Isn't that asking for a life to be taken? To kill, one must also be prepared to be killed." Qinya shot him a cold glance. "No, I mean, what if he ends up getting killed instead?" "That would be so unjust," Shusheng said, looking dumbfounded. "Oh, right? He is not tough enough to withstand that murderer." Qinya immediately tugged him to chase after Jin Zhe. Meanwhile, Lin Yang collapsed to the ground, murmuring, "What happened to my daughter? What happened?" Just as the two entered, they saw a little girl running out with a bright smile, followed by two similarly sized children. "Daddy, what's wrong with you?" Jean Rue was startled by Jin Zhe's fierce demeanor, her steps faltering. "Rue, Rue." Jin Zhe dropped the knife and scooped his daughter into his arms, filled with relief. "You're safe. You're safe. Daddy, are you here to see the little pig?" Jean Rue innocently asked. "That little pig is so tiny, it can only grunt. I want a little pig too," a little boy chimed, bouncing with excitement. "You are the little pig, and you still want another?" Another boy teased, pulling a face at him. Just then, a tall man emerged from the pig pen, his fierce eyes and intimidating presence sending shivers down Shusheng's spine. "Heroine, we should retreat," Shusheng whispered, trembling slightly as he tugged at Qinya's sleeve. Jin Zhe forcefully ushered the three children away, and upon seeing this, the man paused for a moment, then lowered his head, diligently drying his hands on an apron. "I have a question." After staring at him for a long time, Qinya walked over to where the knife had fallen, stomped her foot, causing the knife to leap up, which she caught behind her back. Shusheng immediately rushed over, sticking close to her. "Do you really think he will answer your question?" "He will." Qinya nodded. "Look at his gaze and movements. He is calm. This indicates he knows this day would come, or perhaps he has been waiting for it." "Girl, you have quite the courage," the man remarked, sitting confidently on a large rock, pouring himself a couple of swigs from a jar of liquor. Cough, cough. 5 skeletal remains have appeared in Tansang County. "Is this your doing?" Trembling with fear, Shusheng stood in front of Qinya and stammered, "And today? Selling human flesh to others, is that also your doing?" "Indeed, it was I who did it." The man laughed heartily, tilting his head back to drink, exclaiming, "Delightful." There was not a shred of remorse or guilt on his face. Instead, he leisurely drank his liquor. "You have an enemy," Qinya stated confidently. "Indeed, there is enmity. Deep-seated hatred." The man gritted his teeth, his face contorted with loathing as he slammed his fist down on the stone beneath him. "I have long declared that one day, I shall skin them alive and break their bones." The man ground his teeth ominously, his terrifying gaze able to silence a crying child. "I have reported this to the authorities." Jin Zhe suddenly burst in, looking shaken as he stared at him. "Uncle Dao, why must you do this? Why must I do this?" Uncle Dao ground his teeth in anger. "Heaven has not collected them. I shall. You have a daughter. You must remember to protect her well." He spoke slowly to Jin Zhe, the pain in his eyes cutting deep. Jin Zhe, gazing at him, suddenly shivered. Sister Qi, Uncle Dao, whose real name was Dao Feng, lived next door to Jin Zhi in his youth. Uncle Dao had a daughter named Dao Qi, who blossomed into a beauty at a tender age, but tragically, she passed away soon after, leaving Jin Zhe, who once harbored feelings for her, in tears. Suddenly struck by a realization, Jin Zhe's heart raced. his lips incessantly licking as his thoughts became a muddled mess. He was too young to remember much when Dao Qi died, only recalling the peculiar glances everyone cast towards the Dao family. Once I finish this jar of liquor, I will accompany you to the magistrate. Having bottled up his feelings for so long, he felt as if he might go mad. Qinya pulled Shu Xing to a stone to sit down. Shaking out her bundle, she addressed Jin Zhe and Dao Feng. Red bean buns or steamed buns? I like red bean buns. Give them steamed buns. Shu Xing, feeling a bit reluctant, flipped through the remaining 10 red bean buns inside. Hey, heroine, can you eat a few more steamed buns? Qinya gave him a dismissive glance, took a red bean bun, and stuffed it into his mouth. All right, I know you're full. The rest are mine. Cough, cough. Can you two be a bit more serious? Jianzhe could no longer hold back as he shouted. Look at how stingy you are, truly deserving of being family. Can't you be a bit more generous when treating others to food? Such miserly behavior is truly shameless. He stepped forward and swiftly seized 4 or 5 items, hesitating for a moment as he regarded the knife-wielding figure across from him, before tossing 2 of them over. It is ill-advised to drink on an empty stomach. Thank you. The figure, upon receiving the items, suddenly broke into a bitter smile. Back in the days, seeing you constantly entwined with Sister Qi made me want to thrash you. Over the years, every night as I lay down to sleep, I could never dare to close my eyes. The moment I did, visions of Sister Qi, disheveled and weeping on the ground, would invade my mind. She would lament to me, Father, I hate them. I wish for their demise. Tears welled up in the knife-wielding man's eyes as he recounted the anguish, his fingers digging into the wine jar, creating several indentations. I promised her that I would ensure they meet a terrible end. He raised the bottle to his lips, the fiery liquid choking him, causing tears to stream down his face. I watched as she drank poison before me, rolling on the ground, crying out, Father, it hurts. Oh, how it hurts. She declared, Father, I shall not let them escape unscathed. I will flay their skin and demand blood for blood. Her chilling words seeped through her teeth like a curse from a wretched spirit rising from the depths of hell. 14 years ago, Sister Qi left one evening and did not return. Ultimately, I found my daughter in a dilapidated house in the northern city, her body marred and her clothes tattered, her gaze hollow. In that moment, I wished for nothing more than to carve those men alive. Alive, I tell you, slice by slice. My hands trembled as tears cascaded down my face. I bowed my head, covering my face. The moisture escaping through my fingers as I murmured, Sister Qi, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Did she take her own life? Jianzhe asked with difficulty, unable to fathom how he would react if his own Rue were to face such a fate. He would likely go mad, seeking vengeance with a blade, but what good would that do? Sister Qi was already gone, and her suffering would not lessen by a fraction. A wave of immense panic surged within Jianzhe, feeling as though everyone around him bore ulterior motives. No, it was I who killed them. The man laughed heartily, tears streaming down his face, exclaiming, Father, I cannot go on, Father. I cannot endure this any longer. Please, let me die. Those words became his nightmare, gnawing at his bones like a relentless parasite, tormenting him day and night. I cannot bear it. The man in his 40s sat there, weeping into the wine jar like a child. Shu Shang bit his lip, his throat constricted, turning his head away as he blinked furiously to dispel the mist in his eyes. Qianyi remained silent, waiting for the man to gradually calm before asking, Have you avenged yourself? If not, we can pretend we did not see you today. Return once you have settled the score. Ha ha ha. The man slapped his thigh in laughter, tears flying everywhere, until suddenly he halted, a palpable gaze weighing heavily upon him. Why do you not suspect that I am deceiving you? Shu Shang sighed deeply. No father would jest about his daughter's honor. This statement was laden with gravity and sorrow. How could we inflict further pain upon a father? Indeed, you all know why those men do not understand. Why? He gritted his teeth, his jaw clenched, veins bulging. Those 2 brutes drank themselves senseless, parading this as a boast. They even came to my door, feigning concern, suggesting I allow one of them to be a minor consort. Did you not report them? Shu Shang asked, his voice trembling, regretting the question almost immediately. Do you know how such a case is tried? To allow my daughter to be humiliated again, to have everyone aware of it, only to come back and mock me. It was those two scoundrels' fault. Why should my daughter bear the shame for being beautiful, well-dressed, and subjected to indignity? Each question struck down like heavy blows, leaving one dizzy, and the other four? Xu Sheng exhaled, as if trying to rid himself of the negativity weighing on his heart. Point two were punished for insulting my daughter. But what of the other four? In total, there should be 6 corpses. Those men, the man said nonchalantly, came in the dead of night, scaling my walls, calling my daughter a loose woman, a wilted flower, since they have already defiled her. What harm is there in letting them indulge further? My wife, upon hearing this, could not bear it. She grabbed a knife, intent on confronting them, only to be met with mockery and derision. By the time I drove them away and returned home, her body had already grown cold. Sister Chi had jumped into a well, and after I saved her, she tearfully pleaded with me to bring her poison. Chapter 58. Have you ever witnessed blood streaming from all 7 orifices? He was unnaturally calm, his fingers twitching incessantly on his knees. I shall never forget that scene. Sister Chi coughed up blood as she wept, until at last, her tears turned crimson. I have sent my son off to the army. The man leaned back, appearing utterly exhausted, gazing at Jean Zhe. Young Jean, come here. Jean Zhe stood in shock, hesitating as he approached. The man's complexion had turned ashen, his lips a deep purple, when Qianyi suddenly exclaimed, "This is bad. He has poisoned himself." The 3 rushed forward. Jean Zhe shook him, shouting, "Uncle Dao, hold on. We will take you to a doctor." Xu Sheng, in a panic, stammered, "How did he poison himself? Do you have any antidote? Quickly, save him." He was as frantic as an ant on a hot pan. Qianyi angrily retorted, "I am not a doctor. How can I save him? Do not save me, I beg you." The man spat out a mouthful of blood. "My son has already become a lieutenant." A smile appeared on his face, filled with a father's pride and guilt. "I know he has never let go of what happened to his sister. Thinking of returning to take vengeance, he is still young. He cannot let those scoundrels ruin his life. Failing to protect my daughter is my failure as a father." He patted the large stone beneath him and weakly said, "This is what I leave for him. Jianzhe, please deliver it to him for me. I am not sacrificing my life for those scoundrels. They do not deserve it. Rather, it is out of a father's guilt. I am sorry, my son. I must leave you once more." His eyes closed weakly, murmuring, "Sister Chi, let us not be angry. Those who speak ill of you, I shall treat them to a good meal. Wifey, do not cry. I have dealt with them all, and no one will dare to speak ill before you two again." With a slip of his hand, the wine jar fell to the ground, shattering and spilling its contents everywhere. Qianyi quietly remarked, "May you rest in peace. Safe travels." Xu Sheng grasped her hand and suddenly blurted out, "Let us have a son in the future." Qianyi furrowed her brow, turning around to scold him, only to find his eyes reddened, as if he might cry at any moment, and she silently squeezed his hand. Jianzhe laid the body flat, rolling up his sleeves to wipe the blood from the man's face. When suddenly he asked, "Qianyi, do you take apprentices?" Before Qianyi could respond, Xu Sheng interjected, "No apprentices. Our Qianye's skills are not to be passed on to outsiders," he proclaimed with conviction, "only to her own kin." Jianzhe was infuriated, wishing to flatten that smug expression on his face. "I did not ask you. I know, but in the future, Qianyi will be my wife, and I have the right to voice my opinion." He arrogantly asserted, "If you have the ability, go find a strong martial artist for a wife yourself. Actually, I think you should practice more. Perhaps one day, you won't embarrass yourself too badly." Jianzhe gritted his teeth, the sound echoing as he spun around, seething. "You are quite proud of yourself?" He lunged forward, gripping his neck, roaring. "I have wanted to do this for a long time." He caught sight of Qianyi, who hesitated, unsure whether to intervene, and shouted, "Men fight, women step aside. Step aside. If you have the ability, compete with me verbally." Xu Sheng's face flushed as he struggled to tighten his grip on Jianzhe's neck. "Do you think I am foolish?" Jianzhe retorted, his face reddening as the pressure on his neck intensified. Qianyi face-palmed, utterly embarrassed. "Sir, must you wait until they finish fighting before you enter?" She sighed and called out to the door. "Cough, cough. I am merely afraid of disturbing you, lest you feel uncomfortable." The county magistrate entered, adjusting his attire. "Remove the body. No need to search here. I hope you, sir, can understand my paternal affection." Xu Shang, his eyes bulging, struggled to utter a phrase. The two continued to grapple, faces flushed and necks thick. Qian Yi warned them, "Release one another, or I shall intervene." "You first," Xu Shang gasped, holding his breath. "You first." Jin Zhe dared not relent. Qian Yi called out from the doorway, "Jin Rue, take your father home." Jin Zhe, flustered, released his grip and adjusted his clothing. Striding out, Xu Shang clutched his neck, groaning, "Heartless, leaving me to die. Do not speak of him. I too wish to thrash you." Qian Yi suddenly halted, glancing sideways. Xu Shang blinked, confused. "Why would you want to hit me?" "Be careful not to knock me silly. If you knock me silly, you will bear full responsibility." Qian Yi shot him a glare and quickened her pace. Xu Shang hurried to catch up, passing by the county magistrate, bowing respectfully. "Sir, the case is solved. Is there a reward?" "None, but there are plenty of lashes to go around." The magistrate of Ning County wore a stern expression, exuding an air of authority without uttering a word. "How petty," he muttered to himself, when suddenly a constable rushed in with urgency. My lord, over 10 households have suddenly gone mute." Xu Sheng leaned forward, astonished. "The entire family has lost their voices." "How many people is that?" "Not at all." The constable shook his head earnestly. "Why is that? You are quite the curious one." "Shall I bring you in for questioning?" The magistrate glared at him. "Aren't you supposed to be leaving? Why are you still here?" Xu Sheng left, feeling disgruntled. "What on earth is happening?" After scolding the constable away, the magistrate turned and inquired, "I heard it seems they were trying to save some money. The butcher sold them slightly spoiled meat, and they bought it to eat themselves, neglecting the younger generation." "Ha, indeed. Wicked people have their own misfortunes." The afternoon sun was blinding, and Qianya stretched languidly as she entered an alley, only to hear curses and the muffled cries of several households lamenting their plight. She carefully sidestepped the fray, when suddenly a gust of wind rushed past her, prompting her to hastily step back 3 paces, just in time to see a frenzied old woman lunging at her. Flailing wildly and babbling incoherently, without hesitation, Qianya delivered a swift kick, sending the old woman rolling on the ground. In an instant, a middle-aged man burst forth, pointing an accusatory finger at her. "You heartless wretch! Why did you strike my mother? Look at what you've done to her!" he roared menacingly, raising his hand as if to strike her. "Did anyone witness me hitting her?" Qianya inquired. "We all saw it." The man replied, hands on his hips, brimming with arrogance. Qianya glanced back to see 2 elderly individuals, their mouths moving in furious curses, their faces flushed yet silent. "Did you see her attempt to strike me?" Qianya asked again. "My mother is of advanced age. A few smacks won't cost her any flesh," he retorted, justifying himself. Qianya scrutinized the scene. Very well, there were only 4 people nearby, and 2 of them were mute. "Do you know who I am?" "How the hell am I supposed to know who you are?" The man's lecherous gaze roamed over her, lingering on her chest, as he chuckled lewdly. "Just pay for the medical expenses. At least 10 taels, or else you can stay and be my wife." "I have no idea." Qianya nodded, suddenly leaping forward and delivering a punch that sent the man seeing stars. Another kick followed. "Are you feeling bold?" A slap landed on his face. "You think you're tough, don't you? Just a con artist." With 2 more resounding slaps, the man's face quickly swelled with anger. Enraged, Qianya struck him again, and he staggered, spitting out a mouthful of blood, 2 molars mingling with it. "Humph!" She tossed him aside and approached the old woman. "You are no one to me. Why should I tolerate you?" Grabbing the old woman, she swiftly removed their belts, binding them together and hanging them on the wall, one inside and one outside. "Let's see if there's any substance in your heads. I'll help you pour some out." "No need for gratitude, you foul!" The man began to curse, only to have Qianya shove a mouthful of mud into his mouth. "With that mouth of yours, mud is fitting," she scoffed, for she was the notorious tyrant of Shuangyan Mountain. Upon entering the alley, Xu Sheng was momentarily stunned. "Heroine, what provoked you?" "He insulted me," Qianya replied succinctly. Xu Sheng nodded in understanding. Qianya regarded him curiously, sensing something amiss in his reaction. Just as she was about to speak, Xu Sheng pushed her away. "You go ahead. Something's gotten into my shoe." Hey, wait." Qianya barely had time to protest before being hurriedly pulled away. Once she had distanced herself, Xu Sheng scrutinized the man, who spat out the mud in rage, cursing, "Where is that harlot? That wretched woman?" Before he could finish his tirade, Shusheng stuffed a pair of foul socks into his mouth. "Consider yourself lucky. These are the socks I've worn for 3 days." Then, she stripped him bare, even going so far as to tear a piece of cloth to tie a bow around his navel. "Ugh!" The man rolled his eyes in disgust. Not far off, Qinya, peeking from behind, quickly covered her eyes. "Good heavens, will he get needle eyes?" "Qinya, Qinya!" Shusheng approached with a beaming smile. Qinya hastily stepped back, maintaining her distance. "What is wrong? Are you hungry?" she asked, puzzled that haven't you changed those socks in days? She glared at him. "Ha ha ha!" Shusheng chuckled awkwardly. "Well, I only brought 2 pairs. I changed one when we bathed in Yayan County. You didn't stash the smelly socks in the carriage, did you?" Chinya's expression shifted, realizing why she had been smelling something odd. "No. I specifically wore a pair that was torn. I discarded it immediately." He felt proud of his cleverness. "Heh." Chinya scoffed twice, turning to leave. "Hey, Qinya, heroine, fair maiden, the handsome yet formidable heroine. Please pause." Qinya paused a moment, but as he caught up, she quickened her pace again. "Wait." The man sounded somewhat forlorn. "What is your issue? In a court trial, we even discuss motives. Well, I merely found your stinky socks repulsive." Qinya replied. "But I already gave them away." Shusheng paused. "I gave them away? Which hand did you use to take them off?" "This one." Shusheng raised his right hand. "Then keep that hand away from me." Disgusting. Chapter 59. "Oh dear, you've arrived. But why are you carrying something?" Grandmother Jean regarded her disapprovingly. "Child, why such extravagance?" Qinya was taken aback, turning to Shusheng. "Is it customary to bring a gift when visiting?" "I suppose so." Shusheng answered, lacking confidence. Mrs. Qin approached with tea, noticing the bundle on Chinya's lap, her expression softening. "You know, when visiting for the first time, one should not arrive empty-handed. It shows a complete lack of courtesy." Qinya chuckled. Pushing the bundle forward, "I rushed over during lunch. I didn't bring anything substantial. I hope you can forgive me. I barely ate at noon, just picked up some steamed buns and pickles. Please don't scorn them." She knew better than to mention they were leftover. "Oh my, so much." Upon opening the bundle, it revealed a bounty of fluffy steamed buns and a large bag of pickles. Mrs. Qin's smile widened as she looked up at Grandmother Jean. "Mother, I'll slice some buns for you to enjoy with green bean soup." Grandmother Jean nodded. "Take a couple for Chang'er, and get him some pickles too." Mrs. Qin agreed, then turned to Qinya. "Sister, I'll prepare some green bean soup for you to try. You sweating profusely in this heat." This warm demeanor took Qinya by surprise, and she quickly said, "Sister-in-law, it's fine. You're busy." Mrs. Qin cheerfully carried the bundle to the kitchen. Shusheng nudged Qinya, whispering, "No wonder she was displeased at noon. We were discourteous." The 2 unrefined souls were utterly oblivious to the etiquette of visiting for the first time, wherein one should not arrive empty-handed, even if it is just a token gesture. "With so many buns, how long will they last?" Mrs. Qin mockingly counted, 45 buns and 5 red bean buns. "There are 2 left, one for Chang'er and one for father." As she muttered to herself, she took 3 red bean buns and sliced a platter of buns to bring into the main hall, alongside several bowls of green bean soup. Social niceties are, after all, a matter of reciprocity. You give me an inch, and I respect you a foot. After briefly discussing the case and bidding farewell, the 2 took their leave. In the evening, the sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson. Qinya squinted at the horizon. "Do you think tomorrow will be a fine day?" "Indeed," Shusheng affirmed with a nod. "How do you know?" Qinya scrutinized him. "Morning clouds mean no travel. Evening clouds mean a journey of 1,000 miles. Shusheng flashed a smug look. "Trying to test me, are you? Well then, let us go buy provisions. We shall travel tonight." Qinya set off towards the inn, with Shusheng hopping behind. "Why must we travel at night?" "Because you can't fight back." Qinya tossed back nonchalantly. "All right, you win." Shusheng wiped his face and followed dejectedly. "Buy me more pastries." "How old are you, and still so greedy? Do you think pastries are only for children?" he exclaimed, eyes wide in surprise. "How is this shop still in business?" "Go by yourself." Qinya replied impatiently. To her, meat was the priority. Shusheng looked at her hesitantly. "But my money is with you. Are you suggesting I pocket it?" She halted, turning to face him with a blank expression. "No. I merely wish to request a gift of one tael from the heroine. He bowed respectfully, extending his hand with palms up. His demeanor pleased Qinya, who in a good mood handed him 2 taels, waving him off as if releasing a bird, as they departed from Tanxiang County. A weary man riding a swift horse galloped in. Shusheng watched closely, catching a glimpse of worn armor. Why would he choose to take his own life? Qinya wondered aloud, perplexed. Doesn't he have a son returning? Why didn't they meet? Because he fears that his mistakes might hinder his son's future prospects. Most importantly, he worries his errors may affect his son's reputation. Shusheng turned back, speaking with a distant tone. Suddenly reminded of his father, lost in a wave of memories, in his childhood. He harbored a fear of darkness and thunder. Whenever terror overwhelmed him to the point of inconsolable crying, he would sit by the edge of his bed and demand that he recite his lessons. Explaining each word meticulously, I once believed he harbored an aversion towards me. He chuckled softly twice. It was only later that I comprehended his adherence to the philosophy of a stern father and a loving mother. No matter how much love he received, he could not afford to show an ounce of it. Qinya, have you ever pondered what your parents are like? As the night gradually fell into a profound silence. With an endless darkness enveloping the world, he found no sense of solitude or dread, perhaps due to the presence of those beside him. He turned his gaze to Qinya's profile and smiled foolishly. To be honest, when you stare at me like that, it gives me the creeps. Qinya reached out and straightened his face. Shusheng resisted, his cheeks squished together as he mumbled, "There's nothing to feel guilty about. So why should I be afraid? I'm merely looking. It's not as if I could lose a piece of flesh." Shusheng tilted his head and kissed her palm. Qinya let out an exclamation and turned to glare at him. "You still haven't answered me." "No, I haven tea, because I believe a father should be like Master Kuro, unflinching in the face of adversity, strict yet benevolent. A mother ought to resemble Master Mingjing, nurturing yet not indulgent." "Well, in that case, it seems certain that Qinya will become a wonderful mother in the future." Shusheng rested his hands behind his head, leaning back against the carriage. With one hand, he tugged at his ear. And Qinya exclaimed in annoyance, "Always calling me child and daughter. Did I ever say I would marry you?" Shusheng protested. "Oh no, please. You've accepted my token of affection. You wouldn't dare back out, would you?" Who knows?" Though her face was full of anger. Her eyes sparkled with mirth. The hand that held Shusheng's ear bore a shiny silver bracelet, much like her eyes, pure and bright. "What do you mean, who knows?" Shusheng cried out in exasperation, wrapping his arms around her waist and shouting. "Let me tell you, if you dare to marry someone else on the wedding night, I shall set fire to the place. I never would have guessed you had such audacity." Qinya looked at him in surprise. "Nonsense, with my wife nearly gone, if I don't act boldly, I might end up alone for life." He exaggeratedly buried his head against her chest. Chinya's face flushed, and she hastily pushed him away. Suddenly, the donkey cart jolted violently, and Shusheng, who was already unsteady, stumbled forward into Qinya. The two locked eyes, one above and the other below. Shusheng slowly lowered his head to kiss the corner of her mouth. The cart jolted again, and Shusheng swayed as he leaned in to kiss her. Qinya closed her eyes, lying beneath him as their lips exchanged breaths in a tender embrace. So obedient, he pressed his forehead against hers, his gaze traveling from her elegantly pointed nose down to her lips. "Don't take it too far." Qinya poked his chest. Shusheng grinned mischievously, deliberately pressing down further. "My beauty, it won't be so easy to escape." His hand caressed her cheek, slowly moving to her neck, murmuring, "Qinya, your neck is exquisite, fair and elongated." Qinya glared at him with her round, bulging eyes. "Just wait." Shusheng smirked, quickly responding, "My dear, I acknowledge my mistake. I suspect you are itching for trouble." Qinya shot him a sidelong glance. In a sudden burst, Qinya leaped up, regardless of being in the cart, and began to beat him mercilessly in the village of Langtu. Ma Daodu patted his mother's shoulder. "Mother, what are you staring at?" At that moment, Aunt Ma, who was peering through the crack of the door, jumped in fright and turned to scold him. "Sneaking around, what are you up to? You nearly scared me to death." Ma Daodu looked at her suspiciously. "Who's really sneaking around here? Mother, why are you lurking at the scholar's door? Go on, you're everywhere." Aunt Ma waved her hand impatiently. "I'm just checking to see if he's home." "Mother, Whether he is home or not doesn't he concern you. But you certainly are blocking his door. Ma Dowdu leaned his hoe against the wall and sat on the stone steps, scraping the mud off his grass shoes. Father called for you. You should be weaving a few pairs of grass shoes instead of running around. Go on, mind your own business. When did it become your place to manage your old mother? Aunt Ma scolded. Why are you so bothersome? Fine, mother. I'll leave, but you must tell me why you're looking for the scholar. Ma Dowdu lifted his shirt to wipe the sweat off his brow. Just as he was about to grumble impatiently, Aunt Ma suddenly turned mysterious. This time, it's something good. What good thing? Ma Dowdu looked at his mother in disbelief. Didn't he know that if it were truly good, she wouldn't he be standing here? You see, this scholar is no longer young. Speaking of this matter, Aunt Ma felt quite proud, almost wanting to applaud her own cleverness. Your mother intends to propose a marriage for him. That indeed sounds like a good thing. Ma Dowdu nodded, then added, I'm not that young either. Why aren't you in a hurry to find me someone? I'm your biological child. Hey, you little rascal. Are you just asking for a scolding? Aunt Ma smacked him lightly on the head. What are you so anxious for? It's not like anyone is interested in you. Aunt Ma scolded. Why don't you ever go out and take a look? Why must I worry about everything? Who is going to do the work in the fields? Ma Dowdu countered. Or are you planning to work in the fields with my brother? How could that be? The wheat can't be exposed to the sun. If it weren't for his father's insistence that he was indeed born of his mother, he would have thought he was adopted. This girl is beautiful, can write and composes poetry. She has taken a liking to this scholar's reputation, which is why she asked me to inquire. So, are you still going? Ma Dowdu stood up, picking up the hoe, saying, don't mention it to the scholar. He certainly won't agree. Why not? Because he finds you distasteful. Just seeing you makes him want to rush home to wash his eyes, let alone listen to you. Chapter 60. After dinner, during a brief rest, Old Man Ma was puffing on his pipe, remaining his usual silent self, speaking only when necessary, seemingly having turned into a half-mute. After a while, he casually remarked, You should take some snacks and visit Zhao Matchmaker. He knocked the ashes from his pipe, throwing out a casual statement that startled Aunt Ma. What do you want with that woman? To discuss a marriage for the eldest. Old Man Ma continued filling his pipe with tobacco, his eyelids not even fluttering. What's the hurry? When it came to Ma Dowdu's marriage, Aunt Ma felt a bit weak, as she was preparing to arrange a match for Xiao Mai, but the funds were a bit tight. I don't care. Before Xiao Mai's match is arranged, we must settle the eldest's marriage. Old Man Ma puffed on his pipe, his expression calm, showing no signs of anger. Yet Aunt Ma dared not take it lightly. I don't care about anything else. Whatever Xiao Mai gets, Dowdu must receive the same. Old man, our family's situation is what it is. We only have that little silver. If we have 10 taels, it's 5 for each. Old Man Ma's tone was firm. Usually, he might favor the younger son with a little more. But marriage is a lifelong matter that must be fair between the brothers. You, his mother. He suddenly called Aunt Ma's name lightly, and she flinched, glancing at him timidly. Old Man Ma rarely lost his temper. And when he did, he remained composed. Every time he called her like that, Aunt Ma felt a chill down her spine. Father. He lifted his eyelids to glance at her. Old Man Ma stated, his mother. You usually manage the household and you favor the younger one. I have no objection. Hearts are inherently biased. Even fingers differ in length. Thus, Old Man Ma didn't find anything wrong with Aunt Ma favoring the younger son. However, when it came to Dowdu and Xiao Mai's marriages, they must be equal. He spoke emphatically. If I find out you were trying to pull a fast one on me like you did with Swair's marriage. His eyes shone fiercely, frightening Aunt Ma into a shudder. Don't say a word. I'll immediately split the family, and you can go with Xiao Mai and them. Oh dear. Just thinking about that incident makes Aunt Ma's scalp feel numb. Father, I understand now. Old Man Ma nodded, turning to Ma Xiao Mai. Work well in the tavern. If I hear of you skipping work again, I'll give you a good slap. Understood, father. Ma Xiao Mai was as obedient as a quail in front of his father. After silently smoking for a while, Old Man Ma suddenly said, Dowdu, we have plenty of vegetables at home. Take some to your sister, and bring some freshly harvested wheat. Remember to have it ground. And see if she needs help with any heavy chores, you go assist her. Yes, father, I understand. Ma Dowdu glanced at Aunt Ma, who was fidgeting, and asked, Father, how much should I take for my sister? 10 jean of wheat and a few jean of sweet potatoes. Aunt Ma opened her mouth to object, but upon meeting Old Man Ma's stern gaze, she immediately fell silent. Old Man Ma stood up and walked into the house. And Ma Dowdu suddenly noticed how severely his father hunched over. I in the cellar. Ma Dowdu was rummaging through the sweet potatoes when Ma Xiaomai approached from behind. And Ma Dowdu turned curiously and asked, "Why did you come down?" "I thought I'd come to help you out." He pretended to pick a few sweet potatoes and toss them in, to which Ma Dowdu hurriedly exclaimed, "Those are for planting." He sulkily threw back what he had picked. "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't wander around here. It's giving me a headache." Ma Dowdu glared at him, annoyed by his pacing. "Well, brother, it's not that important." Ma Xiaomai chuckled awkwardly. "Just, brother, could you lend me some silver?" "For what?" "I accidentally smashed a jar of wine at the tavern." He fidgeted as he explained. "The owner wants 5 coins in compensation, so I thought I'd ask you to lend me some." 5 coins? What kind of wine is so expensive? 5 coins isn't much. I have jars that cost 5 taels. Ma Xiaomai looked down on him for his lack of insight and urged, "I am aware that you have not given the money you earned as a carpenter to mother recently, so do not claim you have no funds to lend me." "No money," Ma Dazhu indeed replied, lowering his head to pick up sweet potatoes. "Brother, you are my own brother." Ma Xiaomai fixed her gaze upon him and insisted, "I know. You are also my dear younger sibling." Ma Dazhu nodded. "Why don't you ask mother for it?" "Ha, isn't it because I fear she will scold me?" His voice lacked conviction. In truth, he was afraid that if he asked mother for money, father would also demand her to give Ma the 5 coins. "Brother, dear brother, lend me a little." Ma Xiaomai smiled sweetly, "Just a bit to tide me over." Ma Dazhu looked at her, suddenly sighed. "I have no 5 coins. Would 8 one suffice?" "Yes." Before she could stretch out her hand, he snatched it away, muttering as he walked, "What a miser!" Ma Dazhu shook his head and sighed. Shouldering the sack and climbing up, he felt as though he were the one borrowing money from her. In the most remote part of Xiqing, Lucien, Ma Dazhu panted as he set down his sack and knocked on the door. Sister, are you home?" After a long pause, someone hesitantly asked, "Is that Dazhu?" "It is I." "Sister, please open the door." The door first opened a small crack, then slowly swung wide. "Dazhu, why have you come?" The woman inside appeared fair yet deeply troubled. "Sister, father sent me to bring you something." Ma Dazhu gazed into Ma Suayer's eyes. "Sister, why are your eyes swollen? Has someone bullied you?" No. Ma Suayer shook her head, instinctively turning her face away, still claiming nothing is wrong. "Your forehead is so bruised." "What happened?" Ma Dazhu was unconvinced and prepared to inquire about his nephew. "Sister, where is Xiao Tang?" He. Suddenly, Ma Suayer burst into tears. "Dazhu, Xiao Tang has been taken away by them." "What?" Ma Dazhu became alarmed. "How could they have taken Suayer back? What do they want? Did they not initially reject you both? Why is it that now, when he has grown, they wish to take the child back? Last month, Debeo drowned in the river, and then they came knocking, claiming Xiao Tang is their family's eldest grandson, demanding to take him back." As Ma Suayer spoke, tears streamed down her face again. "How long has it been? Why didn't you return home to tell us?" Ma Dazhu reproached her for not communicating during such events. "Today marks the 3rd day. As for returning home," she coldly laughed. "I told you I would not go back. Sister, why are you so stubborn?" Ma Dazhu scolded her in frustration. Emma Suayer remained silent, merely sitting there and crying. As the sun set, a donkey cart ambled into Lucien, dragging the remnants of daylight. She stood in the light's shadow for a moment, then resolutely stepped forward. As their paths crossed, Qinya felt a pang of recognition and turned to look back, only to see a figure in gray, burdened with a bundle, exiting the city gates at that moment. The figure also glanced back, revealing a face marked with pockmarks and a large bruise on the forehead, the only sign of past brilliance shimmering in her eyes. Their gazes met in the air. And moments later, the figure slowly walked away. "Safe travels," she thought to herself. "Qinya, what are you staring at?" Xu Sheng inquired, peering at her expression. Qinya shot him a cold glance. "What business is it of yours?" His tone was bold, clearly indicating that the fire within her had not yet extinguished. He inched closer. "Oh, Qinya, do not be angry." "Humph," Qinya retorted with a haughty snort. "Lady hero, be magnanimous. Do not let anger mar your spirit. When you get angry, you drive the cart so swiftly that I feel as if my bottom will be jostled apart," he complained, half seriously. Perhaps I should tie you to the back of the cart. That would surely keep you intact. Qinya shot him a sidelong glance and, stretching her arms, prepared to assist him. No. Xu Sheng exclaimed, dramatically clutching her arm. Heroine, I recognize my fault. I should not have treated you lightly. Who could resist your allure? He pouted with a hint of grievance. With veins bulging on her forehead, she ground her teeth and scolded, If you dare speak nonsense again, I will send you flying all the way back. Oh, Xu Sheng lowered his head in defeat. Leaning against her, he muttered complaints about Qinya's lack of humanity. Infuriated, Qinya promptly kicked him away. After returning the donkey cart, Qinya, shouldering her bundle, prepared to leave without casting a glance back. Qinya, Xu Sheng called after her. Struggling to carry 2 bundles, a group of people by the roadside suddenly halted. One stout woman whispered to a delicate-looking girl ahead, who shyly surveyed the scene while clutching a handkerchief, then lowered her eyes and imperceptibly nodded before hastening away. A steward-like figure among them waved to the woman, handing her a sum of silver while giving her instructions. The woman smiled broadly, nodding repeatedly. Why are you following me? Qinya glared at Xu Sheng at the foot of Tsuaping Mountain. Xu Sheng, eager to please, replied, I merely wish to see if you are still angry. He held the 2 bundles carefully and smiled at her. Apologies. He struggled to extract a package of dried meat from his sleeve. Oh, Qinya, please do not be upset. Qinya maintained a stern expression, her lips pressed tightly together. Observing the growing anxiety on his face, she couldn't help but smile, casting a half-amused glare at him. All right, hurry back. Do not expect me to wait until dark to escort you home. Oh, that is precisely what I was thinking. His watery eyes turned round and innocent, exuding an undeniable charm. Qinya's heart softened. I shall at most send you to the village entrance. Thank you, noble heroine. He bowed sincerely. Upon reaching the village entrance, Qinya turned to leave but was pulled back. Xu Sheng embraced her, resting his forehead against hers, whispering, Wait for me. Once the house is repaired, he trailed off, his ears reddening. Qinya responded softly, a hint of maidenly bashfulness emerging. Xu Sheng cupped her face, kissing her for a while before reluctantly parting, reminding her, You must remember to think of me. Qinya blushed, casting a playful glare. Now hurry up and go. When he returned home, it was just in time for dinner in the village. With hardly a soul in sight, Dezu contemplated fetching some lumber to prepare for his upcoming marriage, intending to place something in the house. Upon stepping outside, he noticed the large lock missing from Xu Sheng's door, realizing that he had returned. Chapter 61. Scholar, scholar, Ma Dazu called out at the door. After a moment, Xu Sheng peeked out from behind the door, recognizing him and opened it wide. Come in. After he stepped inside, the door was shut with a bang. Dazu pointed at the dust on Xu Sheng's head and the black stains on his face, asking in astonishment, Scholar, what have you been doing? You look as if you've dug through the bottom of a pot. Nothing, just cleaning up the dust at home. Xu Sheng glanced at the axe Ma Dazu was carrying and asked, Are you heading up the mountain? Yes, I thought I might chop some wood to bring back for you, as Ma Dazu admitted, feeling somewhat embarrassed.